special city council meeting. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? This should be brief.
Certainly. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez is not present. Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Sten.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon is not yet present. Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez is not yet present. Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
And Mayor Rouse.
Here. All right, very good. We have an item to read.
Yes, item 1, fiscal year 2023 recommended operating and capital budget.
Very good. Mr. Isaacson, are you presenting? Please proceed.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Eli Isaacson. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Santa Barbara. I want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to present the FY 2023 mid-cycle budget this morning. I have with me the Community Development Management Team, James Hamilton, our Business Manager, Renee Brook, City Planner, Tina Dye, Chief Building Official, Laura Doubles, Housing and Human Services Manager, Jason Harris, Economic Development Manager, Tess Harris, State Street Master Planner, and also Liz Stotts, who is our Homelessness Programs Response Analyst. Where is our presentation?
Go and hit that. Here, click. And James needs to actually click on it. Yeah.
There we go, thank you. On the screen, we have the outline for today's presentation. I will provide the department overview and then turn to the division managers to review program highlights and accomplishments. Then James Hamilton, the business manager, will run through the budget overview and our department's budgetary reductions, and we'll be leaving time at the end for questions, public comment, and discussion. So on this slide, we have the department's organizational chart and our staffing. As you can see, planning and building and safety are our two largest divisions. Then we have housing and human services and admin. We have 12 programs, 6 funds, total of 81 FTEs, and we currently are running at 12 vacancies in the department. These are our total expenditures by fund. As you can see, the majority of our expenditures come from the general fund, around 80%. We also have expenditures in the affordable housing fund at $1.26 million, or 7%. CDBG and Home are both federal programs. PLHA, the Permanent Local Housing Allocation, is a state program. And then there's SEMP, which is also a state program, which is a very small portion of our budget, or of our department's expenditures. Here are the general fund expenditures by division. Again, you can see building and safety and planning are the two largest divisions in the department, then followed by administration, and then housing and human services. If you look, these are expenditures by category. Again, the largest category of expenditure is salaries and benefits for the department. This slide outlines the FY23 staffing changes. We've added a FTE, planning technician in the zoning program. Renee Brook can talk about this more during her presentation, but this was to address some intake choke points we had in our planning process, and so we've added some capacity there to help with that. We've also increased some part-time FTEs to full-time FTEs in 2 different divisions in the department. We've also eliminated the housing project planner. That is something that Laura Doubles will talk to in her presentation. On the next few slides, I'll discuss the department's org chart and how we are making changes to be better positioned to respond to changing demands on the city and the department. So this is the organizational chart when I came to the city roughly 9 months ago. As you can see, we were organized in four divisions. At this time, we had roughly 8 vacancies, many of which were part of a planned budget reduction or expenditure reduction strategy. This is our organizational chart now. We are now organized in roughly 6 programs, or divisions, excuse me, with the addition of Jason Harris to the department is the Economic Development Manager, and the addition of Tess Harris, Special Projects State Street Master Planner as well. We've also created a new position of the Homelessness Programs Analyst, and that position reports directly to me now. I think right now we are currently at 12 vacancies in the department. So it's a slight increase from where we were in August of last year. This is the organizational chart we'll be working on over the coming year. The big difference here is we are grouping economic development and State Street Master Planning and our homelessness response efforts into a group with a working title of Community Vitality Initiatives. In the coming months, staff and I will be working to better align and coordinate our efforts in these interrelated areas of economic development, downtown master planning, and homelessness response to improve our capacity to address community vitality and quality of life issues across the entire city. These individuals currently are part of the admin division, which James Hamilton will now provide an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Isaacson. Good morning, Mayor Rouse and council members. My name is James Hamilton, the Community Development Business Manager, and I'm going to kick off the program highlights section of the presentation by walking you through the Administration Division. The Administration Division contains a single program and has just over 8 FTEs allocated to it. And before I get into a little bit of what we do here, I just want to focus your attention on this summary information that's provided in a lot of these slides, and quickly explain that the budget information that you see here is the fiscal year 2023 expenditure budget, and the FTEs, that's the full-time equivalents allocated to that operation. You'll notice this is a fractional value and not a discrete value, and the reason for that is there's a lot of staff that are allocated across multiple programs within the department. This number agrees to the online budget book, even though it may look a little odd having a 0.18 FTE. And the last section is just the programs that are contained within that operation. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do in administration. We provide financial support to all divisions within the Community Development Department. We coordinate the annual budget process, prepare quarterly department budget reviews, and through our graphic design position, we provide both departmental and citywide illustration and graphic design services. And additionally, we have a board and commission support team that supports the various boards and commissions in community development. And lastly, we strive to provide excellent customer service, both internally and externally. I'd just like to highlight a couple of current year workload items and accomplishments. One is, while a citywide effort and a department-wide effort, staff and administration is working to manage the migration of our web pages to the new website platform that's being launched shortly. Another accomplishment in the current year would be transitioning back to in-person meetings. We were fully remote, now we're back to in-person, and continue to offer a hybrid option to those meetings that are televised. We have the administrative supervisor collaborated with other staff to facilitate the posting of public comment to the city's website to make that available to anybody that wants to see that for our boards and commissions. And then looking forward, some of our priority projects include developing a departmental plan for website sustainment as we launch the new platform. hopefully making hires for our vacant positions so we can deliver the highest level of service to our department and external customers as well. And continue a process of transitioning from paper to digital forms and verifying ADA compliance with those as we make that change. I'm going to pivot to the successor agency for a minute here. Historically, the Community Development Department has presented the successor agency with our budget presentation, and I just want to give a quick update on the dissolution. So as background, in 2012, the redevelopment agency was dissolved. The successor agency was created to wind down the RDA, and that's been a long wind down process. In January of this year, 2022, the Santa Barbara County Oversight Board, who manages or oversees the successor agencies in the county, approved final dissolution. And then finally, on March 1st, the State Department of Finance acknowledged and accepted that dissolution. So the successor agency is no longer. There is no budget in fiscal year 23, and we will not present it in future years. I stepped in for the end of that process, and the heavy lifting was done by other staff, the Waterfront Business Manager, Brian Bossy, Assistant City Attorney, Sarah Connect, my predecessor, Sue Gray, and a County Manager, Doug Smith. So I thank them for their efforts on that. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Economic Development Manager, Mr. Jason Harris.
Good morning, Honorable Mayor, Council, members of the public. I'm Jason Harris, City's Economic Development Manager. As Mr. Isaacson referenced, the city's economic development function is in the Community Development Department Community Vitality Initiatives area. I'm responsible for overseeing the city's economic development program, which implements the 3-year economic development plan. There is common synergy with the work efforts of the State Street Master Plan and homeless response initiatives. Last June of 2021, the council adopted a 3-year economic development plan with the guiding mission to strengthen the city's economy and enhance downtown vibrancy. I will highlight the ED plan actions completed this past year and the priorities for the coming fiscal year. If you recall, the economic development plan is focused on implementing 3 foundational strategies, each addressing an important area of need that will strengthen the economy, support investment in the community, and revitalize downtown. The economic development plan strategies and supporting objectives and actions are targeted at supporting our local businesses and commercial districts, ensuring the city is a source of benefit to our business community, and revitalizes downtown. These 9 objectives are being implemented by 24 defined actions in the 3-year plan. Year 1 highlights. This past year, the first year of the economic development plan, 9 of the plan's actions have been met. In support of the businesses and commercial districts, the following actions were produced: business training seminar and resource guide for homeless assistance. Business assistance materials were produced in Spanish. A community benefit improvement district ordinance was adopted by the council, and the Coast Village Community Benefit Improvement District formation effort was initiated. Contracted services for downtown business retention and attraction with the Santa Barbara Better Together was executed and worked upon. The city also adopted a sidewalk vending ordinance to create a pathway for micro enterprises. Staff has assisted with integrating Westmont College's initiatives in the downtown, as well as supported a variety of adaptive reuses of retail spaces, such as the former Nordstrom's and Macy's buildings. 2 other actions were met on the State Street Master Plan that Ms. Tess Harris will highlight shortly. For the upcoming fiscal year and year 2 of the Economic Development Plan, the following efforts have been prioritized: initiative promotion campaigns for small businesses in the city's commercial districts will be implemented. Development of new communication and engagement efforts with the business community will be employed. Provide assistance to housing and adaptive reuse projects, as well as facilitate additional downtown special events and cultural programs to support vibrancy of our center city. There will be continued efforts to support micro enterprises with the development of a vehicle vending ordinance in coordination with the city attorney's office. And continued efforts to support local businesses, as well as strengthen and diversify the local economy through local and regional economic development partnerships will be employed. This concludes my portion of the presentation. I will now introduce Ms. Tess Harris, the State Street Master Planner. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Rouse, council members. Thank you, Mr. Harris. My name is Tess Harris, and I'm the State Street Master Planner for the City of Santa Barbara, and I am managing the work effort for the State Street Master Plan. Really happy to be here. I'm going to be highlighting the work effort of the master plan over the last 10 months or so, as well as the priorities related to the master plan for the next upcoming year. In March of 2021, your council adopted vision principles that were recommended by the State Street Subcommittee, and then recommended that the master plan be initiated. Recruitment, selection, and staffing of the Downtown State Street Advisory Committee occurred in July. Council interviewed and appointed 15 members and 2 alternates to the State Street Advisory Committee. That committee began in August of 2021, and we've been meeting monthly to discuss work efforts related to downtown, the scope of work for the request for proposals, and goals and objectives of the master plan. We've had 8 meetings so far. We developed the scope of work to produce the concept master plan for council's consideration based on an adopted vision. With guidance from the State Street Advisory Committee, staff completed the RFP for the State Street Master Plan, which was released in January and closed in March of this year. And then in March of 2022, your council approved $300,000 in the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funding, for the State Street Master Plan work effort, and we anticipate that those funds would be used to help hire a consultant. So I want to take a moment to talk about the vision for the State Street Master Plan. The project, the State Street Master Plan, is really much more than a street closure. It's a comprehensive document to identify what we want to see in our downtown, the physical infrastructure that would likely result in a capital improvement project at the culmination of the plan, operations and activations to foster vibrancy and creativity downtown, and intangible improvements like how we attract various users in our community to the space, placemaking, the connection between public place and the people that we serve, and what is and isn't working right now in downtown. This is really a defining project for the city to decide what kind of downtown we want to have and what the next 50 plus years might look like. So we're looking towards the future for this one. And that's why the major themes within the master plan, in my opinion, each carry their own importance. So I've highlighted those on the slide here. And these are some of the variety of the work efforts that I would anticipate would be included in the State Street Master Plan work effort. Public outreach, technical analysis, the implementation plan, and an urban design framework plan. This slide graphically depicts where we are in the process and some of the major milestones. So we're looking to award a contract for a consultant within the next 2 months, and also expecting to be requesting input from the State Street Advisory Committee throughout the process. And the State Street Advisory Committee is highlighted in the green bar on the slide. The blue line indicates the State Street Master Plan, really when a consultant joins us and we can get moving with finalizing all of the efforts for the scope of work. So now I'll talk a little bit about our priorities over the next year. The main priority right now is for staff to complete the consultant selection process, which we are in the middle of, and negotiate the professional services agreement. We anticipate that initial steps of the master plan process will include holding a series of community outreach events and public meetings, completing a draft of the urban design framework plan that we anticipate bringing before you next year in 2023, and preparing a draft update to the circulation element of the general plan. I'm also anticipating to come before you again this summer to discuss the work effort to date and then to bring the contract forward to your council. And that concludes my presentation. I'll now turn it over to Ms. Stotts, who will be talking about homelessness response.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm here to talk about our work with responding to the homelessness and its impacts. In this newly created role, I work to coordinate the city's internal and external efforts related to homelessness goals, and I administer several grants related to homelessness. In particular, this program oversees and administers a variety of grants from local, state, and federal to programs that provide numerous services such as emergency shelter, safe parking, rental assistance, and to organizations like SB Act, CityNet, and many others. I also facilitate and coordinate various city work groups, including the Council Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Homelessness and the Interdepartmental Homelessness Response Team. In this role, I also represent the city on various regional partnerships and work groups to ensure the city is an active stakeholder in these efforts, including the SB Act Steering Committee, the Santa Barbara County Continuum of Care Board, and the Elected Leaders Forum on Homelessness, among others. I'm also working with the county to enhance coordination of homeless services and service providers. Most recently, I've been working with the County and Housing Community Development Division to establish a collaborative process to implement the encampment resolution grant provided by the state. In the upcoming year, some of the major efforts under this program will include enhancing information on the city website to better communicate to the community on the city's various efforts to address homelessness and its impacts. I'll be working with shelter providers to expand utilization of shelters and partnering with agencies to identify options for housing across the spectrum. That includes from interim to permanent housing and prevention of homelessness. And finally, as the state of California continues to make significant investments and propose new legislation to address homelessness, I will track this new legislation and pursue funding opportunities made available by the state and federal governments. And that concludes my portion, and I'll pass it on to Laura Doubles.
Thank you, Ms. Stotts. And good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Laura Doubles, the Housing and Human Services Manager for the city. And here is our organization chart of where we fall under community development. As you can see, I oversee 3 programs, CDBG and Human Services, rental housing mediation, and affordable housing. In our CDBG, which is also an acronym for Community Development Block Grant and Human Services area, we have 2.21 FTEs in this area, and what we do is we address the human needs for the community. And the way that we do that is we basically give our human service agencies and nonprofits assistance by funding to help them give programs, essential programs for our community welfare. We also fund our capital improvement projects, which have includes our, not only our parks and recreation improvements and upgrades, but also our nonprofit agencies' facilities. We help people of lower income levels, so either low or moderate income is the people we serve. And we also provide staff support to our CD and Human Services Committee. Some of our workload and accomplishments from this past year are on the screen. We received 55 grant applications, and typically we receive between 50 to 55, and that's pretty substantial. We also did 4 capital projects, and we also deliver many of the HUD regulated reports that we're required to provide to them. We do ensure that our CDBG disbursements meet our federal timeliness requirements, and we also ensure that 100% of our sub-grantees comply with their grant agreement terms. In our rental housing mediation program, what we do, and our main focus in this area, is to provide a range of dispute resolution services. This can include mediation, referrals, and information on tenant and landlord rights and responsibilities. And we also provide community outreach and education. And this is all done as a neutral party to hopefully open the line of communication between the tenants and the landlords so that we can prevent and settle these disputes, hopefully out of court before litigation. This also helps in prevention of evictions and also homelessness. And our workload and accomplishments in this area for this past year, our first is 100% successful in obtaining oral and written agreements in virtual mediations. This includes multi-party, large, high-profile cases. And we do nearly 100% in telephone mediations. 86% of our clients have affirmed that they were assisted with their rental issues that were resolved by our staff. 40% increase at our mid-year of Santa Barbara residents served. This is already 72% of our annual target, and a 78% increase at mid-year in Goleta and Carpinteria residents served. And this screen provides the legislation that currently is affecting our program. Our staff are trained and they keep updated on all of the new legislation that comes out, either federal, state, or local. As you can see, the city had passed several legislative measures. The first is the mandatory lease ordinance, in which a mediation service is required, and it doesn't have to be RHMP, but it does. A lot of people do use our services to accomplish that requirement. We also put forth a just cause and no fault eviction ordinance and a relocation assistance payments resolution. The state passed AB 1482 for rent caps on an annual basis, the maximum increase of CPI plus 5% or 10% maximum. They also passed, back in the days of the COVID-19 pandemic, SB 91, which was the Tenant Protection Act, and then that has recently been followed up by AB 2179, in which the governor extended that eviction moratorium through June 30th for any tenants who had already been in the system with their application through the ERAP program, Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And that was on or before March 31st. AB 832 provided emergency rental assistance relief. Federal relief was $32 million to the Santa Barbara County, and also the state was $27 million to Santa Barbara County. And in our affordable housing development and preservation area, we have 4.86 full-time employees. And what we do is we fund and we provide the project management for new affordable housing developments. We fund acquisition of properties, either vacant lots or already existing units, and which most of the time actually requires some rehabilitation in those as well. We provide the loan servicing, the oversight, and the monitoring of our covenants for all of our affordable housing units for the city's portfolio. And we also provide funding and project management through old repayments of CDBG, a housing rehabilitation loan program that we used to have. We take those payments and we actually give grants to help nonprofit agencies with multifamily rehabilitations. And on the screen here is our available project funding as of June 30th, 2022. We did assist this past year with an additional $1.55 million to assist the Housing Authority with a construction cost gap that they incurred with the Veracruz Village development. We had already given $2 million, provided $2 million for the acquisition of that vacant lot. We also used $75,000 in our in lieu funds to support the Green Mobile Home Park transfer from the state Housing and Community Development to the Housing Authority, which I'll discuss in a minute. And our workload and accomplishments for this past year are on the screen. One of our primary focuses in our area is to make sure that compliance of all of our affordable restrictions when any of our units go to sell or resell. We also oversee inclusionary housing restrictions, as well as we make sure that loan payments on all of our outstanding loans are completed. We also have 2,049 rental as well as 457 owner-occupied units that we oversee, our staff oversees. And this last bullet was, again, about the $1.55 million that we provided. When we assisted the transfer of the Green Mobile Home Park, I wanted to actually also recognize Sarah Connect. She's in the audience here today. Our staff and Sarah worked well over a year on this project. We're very happy to finally get this completed, that we prevented a foreclosure that was very much impending with the state. We also have done rehab projects, Transition House, Villa Diego, and we insured this past year approximately 40 refinances and resales. And as the division overall, we converted the grant software from Zoom Grants to Neighborly, and that gives us better grant management capability as well as assisting our nonprofits with applications. We also created a new committee member recruitment flyer and a first-time public service announcement video with our City TV crew, which the link is on the screen here if you wanted to take a look at that. We increased our staffing with the help of council's direction last year on increasing it to 3 full-time staff members in our rental housing mediation program. We also combined 2 of our part-time staff positions and created 1 new hybrid full-time position to cover both areas of affordable housing and the CDBG Human Services. And our priority projects moving forward, we are providing staff support for our new Housing Crisis Task Force Ad Hoc Committee. We're going to be assisting with the housing element update. And on the screen, we have 4 CDBG rehab grants that we are going to be providing. And with that, I will turn this over to Ms. Dye, our Chief Building Official. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Tina Dye, your Chief Building Official. It's good to be here this morning to present to you in person the Building and Safety Division. So as you can see from the slide, we have 4 programs in building and safety. And oh, okay, sorry about that. As you can see from the slide, we have 4 programs in building and safety, and you can also see that we have quite a few vacancies. This represents about a little over 25% of our division. So I'll start with the building counter and plan review service section. Counter checks are most of the time the first face the public sees when they walk into the counter or give us a call on the phone, and they're responsible for application intake and plan routing and coordination, fee assessment, and permit issuance. And also in this unit are our plan reviewers, and they are responsible for reviewing construction drawings against federal, state, and local codes that promote resiliency and sustainability, environmental preservation, and also equal rights for the disabled, as well as life safety. These folks are required to know a tremendous amount of information that changes every 3 years. So some accomplishments this year. We've served over 2,000 customers at the public counter or on our online system, and we've issued over 1,700 permits and completed over 1,800 plan reviews. Our next section is the building inspection section, and this is where the rubber hits the road in the field. Our professionals are out there verifying that the work being done is according to the approved plan. And, excuse me, the inspection staff work with contractors and architects and engineers and property owners to also verify compliance with federal, state, and local codes. These folks are also responsible for keeping up with the latest trends in building technology and codes and standards. So this fiscal year, we've completed over 10,000 building inspections for grading, structural, life safety, and equal rights. And this section is also responsible for specialty plan review for electrical, mechanical, and plumbing disciplines. And we've completed over 500 of those types of plan reviews. Our next section is the Code Compliance Unit. Last year, council approved a little shift in this program whereby we extracted the compliance section from inspection, and we've also shifted zoning compliance into building and safety. It's a new program, so it's in the infancy stages, and we're working hard to get consistency between the two zoning and building and safety compliance operations. So this fiscal year, we've completed over 600 investigations and follow-up inspections to resolve substandard building conditions. And over 300 enforcement-related plan reviews were done. And we created a unified code compliance section in building and safety and the department as a whole. And last but not least is our Records, Archives, and Clerical Services Unit. And these individuals are responsible for archiving all of our permitting activity documents. And they also make appointments with the public to view these documents upon request and provide clerical services for planning, building, and public works. So this fiscal year, they've digitally archived over 32,000 records and made over 12,000 appointments with the public to view plans, and facilitated over $9 million in financial transactions. So I'll wrap up with some recent successes this fiscal year and looking forward to some goals we have for the next fiscal year. This fiscal year, we merged the zoning and building compliance teams, and we created a program for on-site wastewater treatment systems with the county, and implemented processes and procedures related to the gas ban ordinance. We've expanded some options for on-demand permits. I really want to highlight this next one. We've created the ability to provide permit fee estimates to applicants to avoid sticker shock, hopefully, when it's time to get their permit. Improved some permit fee transparency and collection. And we made some improvements to our website and also some improvements to our workflow processes between our permit tracking software and our records management software. And we, as always, will continue to work on more process improvements. So looking forward, we have some priority projects. One of the biggest ones is the triennial code adoption, which is going to be coming to council later this year. And we are going to continue to build a new code compliance sections and programs. And we'd like to create some public outreach programs for stakeholders in the permit process. And we will, as always, continue to train and certify all of our staff and continue with process improvements. And this concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Brooke.
Good morning, Mayor Rouse and council members. I'm Renee Brooke. As mentioned by Ms. Dye, I'm the manager of the Planning Division. And moving along, the Planning Division has 4 sections, which I'll cover in a little bit more detail on the following slides. I do want to also note that our staff in the Planning Division provides support to 6 boards and commissions, Design Review Planning Commission and the Staff Hearing Officer. So in addition to the day-to-day work on project management, we also staff and provide liaison services to the boards and commissions as well. I'll start with the long-range planning and special studies. In this section, as indicated by the name, are the longer-term work efforts, often taking a couple of years to work through major studies, updates to the general plan, the local coastal program, making any amendments to those legislative documents, as well as some zoning ordinance amendments. With that, we're monitoring and adapting to new state legislation, which has been an increasing component of our work in the last couple of years, as your council knows. We also are preparing maps, updating information on our website about development trends and reporting out on those as we need to and as requested. We do, as part of that, prepare our mandatory annual report analyzing our general plan implementation and compliance that we need to file with the state every year, and we provide that to the council as well. And then when needed, we assist other city departments with their long-range planning efforts, like the Community Wildland Protection Plan, the Climate Action Plan, and other documents like that. Some highlights of this current fiscal year. As I mentioned, we completed the general plan annual progress reports. That must be filed with the state by April 1st of every year. That looks at our implementation of the general plan and has a really specific component related to housing development in that. And we file that, and that's available on our website if anyone's interested in reviewing that. As you know, we made an expedited effort to adopt ordinance amendments late last year to implement Senate Bill 9 that was passed. And then ongoing efforts in long range, including working on our housing element update and the related program environmental impact report for that and the climate action plan. Also continuing work on objective design standards for multi-unit housing to try to make that process more predictable for the community and developers. Also, when time allows, when we can get a little relief from the housing element update, we'll circle back to some ordinance amendments we've been working on to clarify some development standards for multi-unit housing and some other cleanup amendments to the zoning ordinance. And then, again, as time allows, we make continual improvements to the land development process and provide support to the Land Development Oversight Committee. The Development Environmental Review section are the case planners that oversee the more complex, typically the more complex projects, and those going to the staff hearing officers. So it's typically might be subdivisions, development plans, larger housing projects that require planning commission review and approval, and then the zoning modifications that require staff hearing officer action. Also, we provide support to public and private projects through the environmental review process and advising case planners on compliance with CEQA and NEPA. We provide a lot of pre-application services, which I'll touch on in a couple other slides. And then staff support to the public counter. This section has been extremely busy in the last couple of years. Some highlights of this current fiscal year in the Development Environmental Review section, as I mentioned, they really are assigned those more major development applications. They've done timely review of those. These projects are subject to the Permit Streamlining Act, and so we must do an application completeness review within 30 days. So we successfully reviewed 80 major development applications, 65 zoning modification applications in this year, as well as 20 pre-application review team. In many cases, those are optional, and developers are making use of that service, which is great because it's fairly low cost. They get an early feedback from staff about any potential red flags or major compliance issues that a project might have. And so it's great to see. It often helps the developer decide whether or not they pursue purchasing a property or going down the road with a certain development project. Similarly, 65 planner consultations, similar service, only the planner consultations focus just on getting feedback from the planning division, whereas the pre-application review team is routed to other land development departments within the city, so Public Works and Fire and Transportation Planning and the Creeks Division will weigh in on those PRT applications. And then we're always trying to increase and improve our outreach to land development stakeholders. In the zoning counter and plan review section, this, much like the building component of this section, is very similar. This is the zoning side of providing counter services at our public counter, as well as reviewing building permit applications for compliance with our zoning ordinance and other planning regulations. We also complete zoning letters and property profiles. That's a service that's optional, but has become more popular as developers or potential business owners are interested in a particular property and wanting to know if their business could work there, if they want to make changes to a property, what would be the likelihood of that being allowed. Working closely, our business liaison working closely with Mr. Harris and Economic Development on those types of inquiries. And then also processing coastal exemptions and exclusions. So that's development proposed within the coastal zone, but doesn't rise to the level of a coastal development permit. So those can be handled administratively through our zoning section. And then continually trying to optimize our Acela software, our permit tracking software, as we adjust business practices to make that more functional for staff and our applicants. So in this year, we've completed about 2,500 zoning plan checks. That's been pretty typical. It's been a pretty standard, steady workload over the last several years, working on the Acela program. As I mentioned, we continue to assist new and existing businesses, primarily with our business liaison, but also counter services too, when people will just seek out somewhat straightforward questions with planning counter staff. And then we recently adjusted our counter hours and duties to better serve both in-person and remote customers. We'd struggled a bit in the pandemic to try to figure out the best way to serve customers. At times, our public lobby was open, and at times it was not. And so now we think we're in a better situation now where we have the counter public lobby open part of the day, so for the morning hours, and then throughout the entire day, we're serving everybody virtually who wants to be served virtually. But we understood there are still some customers who want that face-to-face interaction, and so I think we found a better balance to be able to help everybody rather than being spread too thin and trying to provide all the services for all 8 hours during the day. And I did want to mention, as Mr. Isaacson mentioned earlier about the staffing request for this budget year, we are requesting approval of an additional planning technician. And the intent there is to provide more consistent planning division support at the public counter. The way that we've staffed the planning division counter historically for many years is multiple planners serve 2 to 4 hours at the counter each day. That's just the nature of other work that they have as case planners. We'd like to be able to reduce the number of staff working the counter, provide more consistency and processing applications and providing answers to counter questions. That also would free up our higher level staff, like we have associate planners and project planners working the counter. Currently, we could free up some more hours of those staff members to work on the more complicated questions, the planner consultations and managing the cases. So that's the reason behind that additional request. And then in the design review and historic preservation section, this is really where a large number of the staff members in this section provide support to our 4 design review boards, as well as our architectural historian who works to implement our historic preservation program, providing guidance to property owners wanting to make improvements to their properties that have historic resources. She works daily with those owners to advise them the best way to do that. Also working closely with the Historic Landmarks Commission on designation of historic resources, managing our Mills Act program, and again, providing support to the public counter. So in this current year, we've reviewed about 400 design review applications. Close to a quarter of those have been able to qualify for administrative approval. And so we do, when allowed by the guidelines of the ABR, HLC, and Single Family Design Board, when we've been granted the approval, the authority to approve projects administratively, we do seek to do that. So we can help expedite the process in that way, but we aren't able to approve everything administratively. We also updated and expanded our mailed public notice. There's a sample of one shown here on the screen. We went to a smaller postcard with just the most critical information for people to know how to get involved. We found that our prior notices had a lot of fine print, kind of overloaded them with information, and the really important information wasn't that obvious for people to find out. So we've made it clearer how neighbors can get involved, find out information about the project that's going on in the neighborhood. And then we've also increased the frequency with which we notify neighbors. We've been talking with the Land Development Team Oversight Committee about that in providing an additional point of notice to neighbors during the design review process. Also, really want to highlight with the COVID pandemic coming on in March of 2020 and having to go completely remote, with electronic plan submittals and digital plan review for both staff and our design review boards. We did eventually adjust pretty well to the Zoom environment for those design review hearings. We didn't want to lose that. We didn't want to go back to paper plans. And so we are still working through some challenges with returning to in-person design review meetings, but still keeping the digital plan review component of it. So we're continually working on upgrades to the David Gephardt Public Room to allow that, but really consider that a huge success that we have been able to stay digital in that way and not return to multiple rolled plan sets in our building. And highlighting some other historic preservation program elements here with historic resource evaluations, and then our architectural historian managing our African American Black historic context statement, which is underway and should hopefully be released in draft form very soon for public review. So going forward into the next fiscal year, we hope to complete our housing element update and the associated EIR with that. As time allows, we would continue to streamline our land development processes with a focus this year of reducing triggers for single-family design board, kind of taking a look again at what types of projects require review by the single-family design board and trying to streamline that process, optimize Acela as we continue to update our business processes and our ordinance requirements. And then we're really excited about the launch of the new city website. We've got pretty significant number of community development staff involved in that effort at this time, with the goal of sort of reimagining how our customers interface with the information on our website so that it's not divided by departments, that the customer enters the land development world with how they might think to ask a question about the permit process or the type of project they have in mind, and not, they don't need to know that they need to start with the planning division or the building safety division. Hopefully, with the new website and how we have it laid out, it'll be more apparent to customers how to find information themselves. And with that, I'll turn it back to Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Ms. Brooke. I'm going to move into the budget overview section of the presentation now. I know it's been a little long, so I'm going to try and put a pace on it and get us to questions. The first item that we'll discuss is the proposed fee changes for fiscal year 2023. Community development is bringing forward two general categories of fee changes in fiscal year 2023. The first is a broad across-the-board 5% increase to planning and building and safety fees. This is a necessary increase to offset increases to operational costs, primarily driven by salaries, benefits, and overhead. This increase is also consistent with what you'll see from other land development operations being brought forward this year. And the second fee change item that we're bringing is a number of new planning fees. These were presented in detail at the May 3rd Finance Committee meeting. I'll just highlight a few of them now. We're adding a new fee for emergency coastal development permits. In the pre-application services section, we're creating a 2-tiered system for planner consultations and a 3-tiered system for zoning letters to reflect the broad range and complexity of these requests. And then in the zoning review section, we're adding a review fee for SB 9 projects and expanding the types of fees charged for accessory dwelling units to reflect the varying levels of complexity. And I just want to make council and the public aware that at the following website, santabarbaraca.gov/CD fees, you can find our most recent fee study, any updates to that study, as well as a packet that includes all the proposed changes for this year with a narrative explanation, a costing book for the new fees, and a marked up fee schedule that will show in markup the text and dollar changes. Oops. Now going to move into the financial overview section. This table reflects the general fund revenues and summarizes the revenues by category and shows information for the current year, fiscal 22 adopted budget, the original plan that was part of the 2-year financial plan that was adopted last year, any adjustments to that plan, and then the fiscal year 2023 recommended budget that's being presented to you today for consideration. Overall, with the revenues, there's a 2.8% increase from our original plan. The two major categories of change there are service charges, which are land development permits, and when staff reevaluated that section for this, through this budget development process. They found that there was room to increase, make a minor increase there of $105,000 from our original plan. And then also in the internal charges category, that reflects staff time charged to internal city projects, and when that was evaluated through the budget development process, found there was more capacity for billable hours, so added some, increased that element as well. I'm going to move into the general fund expenditures table and quickly just focus on the adjustments column and step through this. In terms of salary and benefits, from the original plan, we're seeing a $378,000 increase to the recommended budget that's before you today. Of that $378,000, about $140,000 is attributable to changes in assumptions in the salary projection model. The remainder, the $238,000 remaining, is the result of new positions, adjustments to positions to better align them with the tasks they do, and adjustments to hourly salaries across the department. In looking at the allocated costs category, where that's being increased by $126,000, and you've heard this throughout the budget process, the primary driver of that is changes to the insurance allocation to community development. And then in the supplies and services and special projects categories, there were miscellaneous or a variety of reductions made in both those categories. I'll get into a little bit more detail on one of the major reductions there in the next budgetary reduction section. So moving into the final section of today's presentation, department budgetary reductions. Community development had a required reduction of approximately $93,000, and in order to meet that general fund department expenditure reduction, we met it by implementing two methods. The first was a reduction to salaries and benefits in the code compliance program. We don't anticipate a service level impact related to this change. We feel that with efficiencies gained by the consolidation of that program, that minor adjustment to hourly salaries is not going to have a substantial impact. And the second item is transferring the PATH contract from the general fund to another fund. The trade-off with that is it's been transferred to the housing fund, and it slows the accumulation of reserves. And just in terms of the budget that we're putting forward today, it is actually an additional $72,000 below our subsidy requirement. And we are not and the primary driver of that is related to the transfer of the PATH contract. We are not putting forward any additional ask related to the additional savings in our budget. We are just, we hear the budgetary challenges the city's facing. I'm aware of the general fund structural deficit, and we're just putting that forward as help to balancing the overall general fund budget. And with that, we'll move into questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from council? Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These are just kind of all over the place as you're going through it. One of the selling points of an economic development director when we made the choice to support that was second floor city hall presence and immediate access to the city administrator and not having to go through another level of a department head. And so could you, I think the transition I heard was that still existed, but physically he was changing places. Now I see on the chart he's changing places. Could you talk about a little bit about that and help me get over my fear of what that means?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan. Mr. Harris is now reporting to Mr. Isaacson, but I do meet with him monthly, as I do with other department heads that I work with. I meet jointly with him and Mr. Isaacson. He is still located physically in the office adjacent to council offices, so readily available to you. He does spend some time down at community development. The change was made in large part because he was quite isolated without the support of without a support system of staff and colleagues. The work he does can be closely related to the work that community development does in terms of getting the necessary permits and so forth, and it allows him to develop those relationships and provide input on potential process changes, as well as provide support for making sure that business recruitment goes as smoothly as it can through our process. He works closely with Mr. Aguilar in that effort to try and liaise to get commercial projects through quickly. So although he has moved, I think I certainly have still got the direct lines of communication with him, and hope that he remains available to you, and we have not relocated his office space.
Okay, very good. And then the rental housing mediation program, my radar went up that we provide services to residents outside the city in Goleta and Carpinteria. Are we reimbursed for that, or could somebody talk about that?
Yes, Councilmember Rouse and Mayor Rouse and Councilmember.
It's a quick
Yeah,
fall,
sorry.
huh?
Yes, we do have 2 jurisdictions that we have under contract that they pay for our services. It's Carpinteria and Goleta.
Thanks. And then,
Councilmember Jordan, I'll point out that a number of our employees, both public and private, do live in the South Coast. So providing mediation for renters does have, beyond the compensation, it has frequently a direct benefit to people who work in the city of Santa Barbara.
and so when those people are outside city jurisdictions, do we prioritize our employees?
I was speaking to employees, generally public or private. I would have to defer to Ms. Devils on the prioritization of city employees.
Yeah, we don't have a prioritization
Okay.
per se, but we don't just serve our employees either, or their employees. We serve their whole community.
Okay. And then I think everybody knows there's been some chatter in the background on resource challenges with boards and commissions. And I think I heard somebody mention a sentence of it, and then it disappeared, and it wasn't, there's nothing in any of the priority bullets or anything. I was expecting to see maybe a list of them, which were on the charter, which weren't on the charter, which where are we going with that process, and how do we initiate that within this process?
Councilmember Jordan, that's a work item that we are talking about. We haven't bid off yet. We currently, we're focused on getting the budget adopted. I think it's something that we could certainly come back with some preliminary thoughts on that. Any of them is going to have a constituency that is going to be interested in having it continue. So I think it's something that we'll need to do with some thought and care, but certainly there's a lot that goes into maintaining boards and commissions, and in some cases, they require an additional staff person or more just to continue the work of that board or commission. And I do think it's something we need to evaluate. My plan had been to work on that over the year as we're looking at all of our structural challenges with our resource needs and our resource allocations.
So I'd put your office down as the point for that?
I'm afraid I'll have to be regardless. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Colon.
Just a quick add, most of the charter boards and commissions also include a mandate that the council fund them.
Okay. So on all those division priorities for the coming years, I don't see any of mine. And so, and you know what mine are, so I'll just give you the 3 of them, and then I just want some advice on when and how to talk about those and how we fit them in. And that is commercial property vacancy ordinance, short-term vacation rental ordinance, and short-term vacation rental enforcement. And so what's the right time to talk about that? How do we get them folded into, with this group, how do we get them folded into agreement and moving into priority work projects?
I heard 2 of them, and I'm sorry. The third was
Short-term vacation rental
Short-
enforcement.
enforcement,
Yep.
the ordinance, and vacancy. So vacancy is not on our work list yet. Council has not directed ordinance or any work on that effort. So the full council would need to take an action to direct that.
Okay.
The other two are closely linked in terms of updating the ordinance such that enforcement can become more effective. And I'll let Mr. Isaacson talk a little bit more about that. We have had several discussions about getting that done in a timely manner, and I believe he has an idea of a time frame for you.
Thank you, Ms. Bjork. Yes, we have been having conversations. We have been challenged in finding the bandwidth to take this on. As Ms. Brooke mentioned, most of our long-range planning staff who would typically take this on have been tasked with the housing element update. So it's been very difficult to find the proper bandwidth. But we have had conversations. I think we do have an understanding of a path forward to address both the ordinance and enforcement. And I think we can put something together that would then be ready, a draft ordinance and a conceptual fee proposal that would be ready for review by Planning Commission within 2 or 3 months.
Okay. So those two would rest with your office, and a commercial vacancy ordinance would rest with me to gather support up here. Is that the way I understood you, Ms. Brooke? I'm sorry, just Bjork.
The two related to short-term rentals are current work efforts, and they rest with community development, correct? The vacancy control, we would need direction from council to start that work.
Yeah,
And as
not
well,
vacancy control.
I'm sorry,
So you're-
vacancy
Yeah, you're hearing
right.
other issues that may come up later, but I'm
Right.
talking about vacant commercial storefronts, mainly in the downtown corridor.
Yes, and we would need direction from you, and then we would also need to figure out the priority for that work as you keep hearing from us. I'm sorry that we sound like a broken record. Something else would have to be put off.
Okay. I think that's it. Thanks.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. I'll start where we just left off there. So I do support exploring how we can get the commercial vacancy ordinance in there. It relates to a lot of issues we're working on, and we actually are talking about on the homeless ad hoc committee. But with the short-term vacation rentals, I just understand it's coming forward, but I also want to understand better, maybe now is not the time, but just how the enforcement works, because I know the city attorney's office is involved and how there's different models, and I'm not sure how effective or efficient we are because we have such a backlog, and there's a backlog in city attorney's office, there's a backlog in community development, and are there other ways that other communities are doing that we can be more efficient both in our time and in the dollars that we're spending? I know, so have we looked at, for the initial step of providing an outside spending for an outside contractor to do the list of all those that are listed out there, and then that goes to the attorney? So I'm just trying to understand what is the process that we have right now, and are we looking at to be more efficient?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, I appreciate the question. I think, as I mentioned, we will be coming forward with something in a few months, and I think that will include a summary of what we are doing now, as well as alternatives for looking at different enforcement strategies, some that may incorporate the assistance of, say, a host compliance. I believe they're now owned by Granicus, which is a web scraping platform to alert you to non-permitted or licensed short-term rentals operating in your community, to changing ordinances such that the platforms such as Airbnb and Expedia Group, which owns VRBO, and HomeAway will actually participate in the enforcement by removing unlicensed or unpermitted listings from their site. And so we are looking at coming up with an ordinance that makes enforcement more efficient and removes some of the burden from city staff to the platforms themselves to help us with this issue in the community.
So wait, so that's coming forward with all those different options. And then I guess this would dovetail over, for the enforcement actual, it goes to the city attorneys. After you identify it, it goes to the city attorney's office to follow up on that?
Yes, after zoning enforcement reaches out and attempts to resolve it with the owner, if they can't, it comes to us, and we have dozens pending in the office, and we've had success. They are labor intensive.
So that would be something that, in terms of budgeting, I'd like to understand before when we adopt our final budget this year. of what resources are needed on both ends to accomplish that. If we need more resources on the city attorney's side and we need more resources on the community development side. I just want to understand that when we come back on June 8th.
If I might, Ms. Bjork and Mr. Isaacson and I have discussed this. The host compliance analysis will reduce workload ultimately. So the impact on our office will depend on the first two steps that Mr. Isaacson identified, and they should reduce the overall burden.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to make sure we're adequately funding both sides as we go forward into the next budget. Okay, so just a few questions. I guess it would go to, I have a question about the State Street Master Plan. And in particular, there was the issue of the cost for the consultant that has gone up to almost doubled. And the question I get is why the cost and what are we doing, what are we getting for that? And specifically the questions I get are, why can't you just poll the community, have your community come out there and do it, and why can't you do a lot of this in-house? Why are we spending $800,000 that staff should be able to do? So could you clarify what is the new cost estimate for it, and what is the consultant doing that our staff is either not able to do or doesn't have the capacity to do?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman. So the estimated cost of $800,000 is remaining. We are in the final interview stage for a consultant, and so a contract still needs to be negotiated, and that number may fluctuate a little bit before we come back to you. Really, this is it's a large project, and there are a lot of elements included in the project. There's about 15 different items that both your council and the State Street Advisory Committee had recommended be included in the State Street Master Plan. It varies from when we brought it to your council. View corridors came up as an item. There's homelessness, there's economic development, the actual design work, and the list kind of goes on from there. Because there are so many different topics, and the project is really looking at the downtown holistically. So different from other communities that may just be deciding we're gonna close a street permanently and leave it at that. This project isn't that necessarily. That may be included in the project, but this is a bigger ask of looking at our downtown holistically and what is going to work and what's going to attract all of our community members to enjoy the space. Truthfully, it's a very large work effort. The design component itself, we will need assistance from a consultant for that effort. The public outreach component, in order to do it, in my opinion, more effectively than traditional public outreach, I really believe that we need to bring a consultant on board to help us facilitate that effort so that it's not just city staff going out to the community, but there's an unbiased party as well, working in tandem with staff. I want to also highlight that bringing on a consultant doesn't mean that staff is not working on the work effort. There's a lot of work that will be included in the State Street Master Plan, and the project planner and myself will be actively involved in writing the master plan and working on various sections and getting input from the State Street Advisory Committee and managing that process as well. So it's not really one or the other there. And then in the implementation plan and ongoing maintenance and operations, really thinking about what we can do that is realistic in the long term and looking at what a potential capital improvement project looks like. I believe that a consultant will help us in better understanding how we can implement the project in the next 5+ years to get a project that's going to be beneficial for the next 50 years or more. That's just something that increasing the bandwidth for staff will really help. And then one last point is just on the cost piece. Initially, we did not include a cost in the request for proposals at all. And the thought was that we would get a variety of costs. We would sort of decipher what made sense. But then in kind of thinking through it a little bit further, recognizing that those can vary widely. Somebody could come in with a number much larger than what we've capped it at, and somebody might come in a little bit smaller. So we made the decision we had initially made a statement for one number that just wasn't realistic for the 15-plus elements in the master plan. And so we pivoted and looked at all of the different components that need to be included, and that's where we came up with the estimated number.
Thank you. That's very helpful, I think, just for me to be able to talk to the public on why the added costs. And then just to further clarify, so the work of the consultant is also technical in nature. It's providing some of the surveying that we need to do, the design study, whether it's traffic circulation or looking at our building codes, those types of things the consultant would be helping with.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, that's correct.
Thank you. That's what I have for there. And then I have some CDBG questions. Ms. Doubles, so on CDBG, I saw here that we have 55 grants or 55 applications and received 43, and there's a range of funding that we have. And in an effort to be more efficient and receive better outcomes, have we ever given consideration to increasing the amount of the grants, and thereby it would decrease the number of recipients? So we would have it's the same amount, but instead of giving 10 or 20 or 30,000, sometimes more, we would be giving grants of 100,000 or even more to be more efficient and receive better outcomes. Have we ever had those types of discussions? And if not, how do we have those types of discussions?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, yes, they have had that discussion many times, actually. And as you may not know, but we have put a limit of a $9,000 award, hoping to at least keep them from going, below that, spreading it out even more. But it is very difficult, I think, for the committee who has these applicants from very worthy nonprofits in our community to evaluate what they do, and then they already don't award a certain amount. As you can see, we only awarded 43. But if you made it so that the awards were a lot higher, you'd be funding a lot less of those nonprofits. And I think that they try to give, some of or as many of the agencies as they feel is worthy of those grants, a chance.
So maybe that's a discussion that when it comes back to council setting the priorities for next year, I just want to have that conversation, I guess, at the council level, because I'm not sure what the outcomes are on a lot of these if we're managing issues rather than actually making change in it by the way we're currently doing it. We might have better outcomes, or we might just continue to have the same outcomes, and we're at the point we need to have better outcomes. And so maybe when this item comes back and we set the priorities that would, later on at council, we could have that. On the rental housing, I just have a couple more questions. On the rental housing mediation task force, just to clarify, because I've heard both, is it now mandatory because of the one-year lease that if one party wants to go into it, the other party has to accept, or is it voluntary?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, in that ordinance, it is mandatory for them to go through a mediation. It's not mandatory for them to use our program. They could use an outside mediator service, being, a lawyer or whatever, but, or legal aid. But it is a mandatory part of that regulation, yes.
Or when a dispute occurs. Okay.
Yeah.
And then so we have the 2 employees plus the additional one that we had the funding, but yet I see that your capacity is ahead of where we are budgeted for the year. Based on the need and the outcomes that we received there, is there a need for an additional staffing for that?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, that actually is actually with our additional new staff member. So that is to show that we are already serving more with that additional staff member.
Okay. And then on, if we could pull up slide 39. Sorry, I just have a couple more questions. On the affordable housing and development preservation, just want to understand how that's funded and then specifically the reserves.
I'm sorry.
So the Affordable Housing Development Preservation, how is that funded? And then how is the reserve, is it keeping up, or is the reserve, are we spending more and going into reserves and the reserves that get depleted, or is our reserves healthy?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, I can speak to where we get the funding from. In the Affordable Housing Fund, those are old RDA loans that are making payments, that are still making payments because most of the loans were 30-year terms. So all of that is program income that we're receiving from those repayments. That's what actually makes that fund balance go up. Now, out of that, though, we do have admin costs, and so we do try to reserve a certain amount to cover us for, you know, an annual operational cost. But I think maybe, James, you could talk about.
So my question is this fund diminishing over time, or is it going to continue to have new sources of revenue as those old ones come out?
I'm sorry. So it is diminishing over time. And as Mr. Isaacson mentioned, we are eliminating our housing project planner position from our division. The reason for that is because we no longer have redevelopment agency funding coming in. All we have now is just the repayments from old loans. And over time, as those get paid off, our fund will continue to go down. And there's no other replenishing source for that.
Okay, so that basically answers my questions. And so we would need to come up with a new source or someone to continue the work or change this work over time.
Correct.
And then my last question is for building and safety. So I just wanted to understand that there was it says there's a 25% vacancy rate?
That's correct, a little bit over 25% vacancy rate.
And then and what is the cause, what are the causes for that? Is that just natural people are migrating, or are there other structural issues that we're trying to address on that? And are there going to be costs that we would need to try to budget for this year to reduce that vacancy rate?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, we've had a few retirements, and we've had a couple of employees take other positions with other jurisdictions. And we have been recruiting for the last 6 to 8 months. We've held several recruitments, and there's just not a lot of qualified candidates in this field. And across the board, I think, across the city, it's the same story. So I don't think we need any more funding. We have the funding. We just need to fill the positions.
And Mayor and Council, I'll add, we do also supplement our work with contract work, and my understanding is that the contractor is also having difficulty recruiting qualified employees.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ned?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I'll be brief. I was also concerned about the 12 vacancies. It sounds like a lot, and you mentioned bandwidth and not really having, well, you do a lot with a little. That was quite a presentation there. But the impacts long-term, is this sustainable, these vacancies, these 12 vacancies? How many of these are you looking to fill? Just the long-term impacts of those vacancies.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sen. I think it is these vacancies present a significant challenge to our operations. Some of these vacancies are in the areas of some of the things that have been mentioned today as future priorities for the department. And so our existing vacancies challenge our ability to do additional, efforts. Not only that, but it also challenges our ability to keep up with the day-to-day. As Tina mentioned, in building and safety, those vacancies have a direct impact on our ability to turn around plan check in a timely manner, for instance. And to Ms. Bjork's point, we can't just send things out to our contract support because they also have staffing issues. And so staffing issues generally are causing us some challenges. We would like to fill as many of these positions as we can. There are some requirements that have been asked of us around, vacancy savings. Some of that's going to happen naturally because these are very difficult positions to fill. It takes quite a bit of experience and certifications and qualifications to be a senior plans examiner generally, and it's even more difficult to be that individual here at the City of Santa Barbara. So these are difficult positions to fill. Some of these vacancies are presenting opportunities, however. So one of the things we're doing is we are reclassifying a senior plans examiner position that's been challenging to fill and reclassifying that as a business analyst to really focus heavily on optimizing our Acela system from the building and safety side. We have a analyst in planning, Ms. Ellen Kokinda, who's doing a fantastic job of doing streamlining on the planning side of the house. We need a corresponding sort of set of skills and capacities on our building and safety side. And so we've done that this year. We hope to fill that position soon. So we're trying to make lemonade out of a difficult situation where we can, but overall it is a challenge.
Thank you. And I realize too, even when you're trying to contract out, like the RFP with the housing element update, we may not be able to. And I'm very concerned about, if there are plans to contract something out and then it's on staff and staff is already at limited bandwidth, the implications of that. So keep us surprised, and if what we can do, and if those, I like the restructuring and the reclassification, if those salaries need to be competitive to have qualified people, I think that's advisable. So I just wanted to ask about, I really like the hybrid customer service online and at the counter, and that taking time to come to happy medium there. I like the change of the staffing to have consistency at the counter in particular. I'm wondering about, we've talked before about having an ombudsman or someone to see someone all the way through the process. Is that still in discussion? Is it no longer necessary if we have more consistency at the counter, or just your thoughts on that direction?
So Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Seddon, thank you for that question. It's an excellent question. I'm hoping that the business analyst, that position we're creating, will address some of the ombudsman needs that have been identified in the department. I think right now, we have a business liaison who's helping quite a bit on the front end around entitlements. Where I think we aren't providing the same level of service right now is navigating our permitting process. And so I'm hoping that this individual, once they're up to speed and comfortable in the role, can provide quite a bit of assistance on that side. And what we're really looking for is a seamless handoff, right, from our planning services to our permitting services, and so that it really feels to the applicant like it's one large process, not two disconnected processes, which to the credit of staff, I think we've made tremendous strides in that direction over the last few years, but I think there's additional work that we can do.
I agree with both of those assessments. A lot of strides and still some to do. And then digital access to public comment at boards and commissions, and how expensive is that to maintain? Is it a cost issue? Are we going to plan to continue to do that? Thoughts on that from a budget perspective?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sen. I'd actually like to hand it over to Renee Brooke to possibly answer that question.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sten, I'll take that question because staff and administration, we have the board and commission support team and the administrative supervisor who really led that effort. In terms of cost, it's really just staff time. So it takes a little bit of extra time, I think. Probably the hardest part of that was getting buy-in, developing the system, and setting the processes. At this point, I don't believe that it adds any significant amount of time to their processing that is substantial enough to have an impact on adding significant workload to our staff.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I know in teaching that when we went all online, that was a huge learning curve, and then coming back out of it, there's some benefits to keeping some elements online and having that flexibility. So I appreciate that you're looking at that and really adapting as you go to what's the most efficient use there. I had one more question about efforts to develop business retention, expansion, and attracting businesses, but I'll I'll talk to Mr. Harris offline about that. Thank you.
Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of my questions have already been asked and answered. Thank you very much for this thorough presentation. I just want to start by voicing my support for adding to the workload the commercial vacancy effort. So for whatever that's worth, strongly in support of putting that somewhere on the priority list.
Mr. Cologne would like to weigh in.
At some point, it would be useful to get a sense of what the council means by a commercial vacancy ordinance.
Sure, I mean a vacancy tax myself, but happy to discuss that further. That's what I mean. Thank you. And then just one follow-up question for Mr. Harris, and I apologize if this was discussed before I came in this morning, but I seem to recall that when we were allocating our ARPA funds, we identified 50 or 75,000 for some type of downtown business effort, and I'm wondering if that's been programmed or when we're going to be having a conversation about what I know in the scheme of things, it's not a huge amount of money. Just curious about where we landed on that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Harmon, in response to the question of the ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act monies, $50,000 was committed by council related to economic development, business retention in specifics. So I am working on a variety of program concepts. Was waiting for today's briefing to solicit general feedback in relation to economic development efforts. I will also be presenting to council later this summer an annual economic development plan update, the formal report out, and at that point I can give more specifics to the ideas. And just to kind of maybe give some initial thinking, we have two concurrent paths of concepts running. One, as the council may recall, the council's committed $75,000 last year with Santa Barbara Better Together. I've been working with that consulting group on downtown business attraction efforts. They're in the final quarter of their work efforts, so I'm awaiting to see their final report and report out, and that would be a part of the analysis of their efforts, and if there's continued need, the level of responsiveness ultimately, and then concurrent to that, independent, it's just other initiatives related to overall economic development and business attraction, and so I think that would be a part of the annual report plan that I would be presenting later this summer.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Ms. Jordan, you have another question?
Actually, people are sneaking in comments, and I have some
We're
comments.
not there yet.
Okay, well, we've been there, but I'll
We're
wait.
not there yet. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, a lot of my questions have already been answered, but there's still a couple more. There was a comment made about steering away from printed material and going more electronic. I wouldn't want to impose more fees, but have we thought about charging for printed materials?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Gutierrez, I don't believe that we have considered a separate fee for providing printed materials, and I think what you're talking about is a bullet on one of my slides that was kind of a forward-looking effort to continue. And really, as I understand that, that's something that the administrative supervisor has been working on. It's more taking PDFs that are online currently or forms that are online, but they're not digitally friendly, right? You have to print them out and fill them out by hand. So it's taking that and making that a digitally fillable form and ensuring along the way that it has ADA compliance. So people are welcome to print those forms in terms of that effort that I was talking about. They can print them and fill them out themselves if they'd like, but we're just trying to create a more digitally friendly space there.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had is on, it was slide number 22. I think it was Jason Harris's presentation. So I know this was kind of like a broad presentation, but I was wondering some specifics on, promoting small business in cities' commercial districts. Like, what does that actually entail or look like?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez. So as part of the economic development plan, we have one of the broad strategies supporting local business and commercial districts. And within that strategy, there's two concepts. One, in relation to businesses, really wanting to support our local businesses, obviously not looking to develop any specific incentive programs per se, but an overall overarching promotional program to reach out to both our businesses but also our residents to emphasize the importance of supporting small businesses and supporting local purchasing at brick and mortar versus online through kind of like a buy local program. And then in the context of our commercial districts, that's kind of a wide range of both, one, highlighting the uniqueness of the variety of our commercial districts, mostly our neighborhood serving, and they're healthy. I mean, the general report out is our commercial districts throughout the city are healthy. We have very low vacancy both in the retail and overall generally in office. It's our downtown that has that's suffering the greatest, and we have a variety of work efforts related to downtown, as you may have heard already. But then there's also a range of partnership opportunities that are in pursuit. One is working with our sustainability and resilience. They have commercial cleanup programs and have a need to engage with our commercial corridors and our businesses of both how we can assist them. And one of the most important aspects of what the city does to support business is ensuring that they have a sound and healthy environment to which to work, right? That their sidewalks are clear, available, and clean, that the commercial waste is being routinely picked up, that there's engagement with adjacent residents. So there's initiatives to work there. And then we also have a number of business organizations that are wanting to aid and support our commercial districts. So there's partnerships being built and formed in that regard. So those are just some highlights to mention. Obviously, and then just finally, I'll add to that is really exciting about the new city website that's coming on board. That's our kind of foundational base of which we can communicate to the broad public. And we have not had a presence for our commercial districts developed there. And so we'd be building out as we transition to the new website of really highlighting and promoting our commercial districts throughout the city and ultimately engaging them. We have a really exciting initiatives as referenced with the Commercial Business Improvement District initiating on Coast Village. We need to kind of similarly support our other commercial districts that want to support themselves. And that's just one tool. There could be other vehicles, merchant associations, and other initiatives such as that. So that's just kind of the highlights of some of the program efforts there.
Are you planning on having a more in-depth meeting? Because I have questions for each one of those bullet points, but I don't want to draw out this meeting any longer.
I'm happy to follow up with you directly.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, very good. Well, I have questions, but like what Mr. Jordan was talking about, my questions are going to slide into comments. So let's go to public comment. Ms. Gorman, do we have a speaker?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one public speaker, Rich Sander. Rich Sander, please go ahead.
3 minutes, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no public comment. I'm just watching. I'm here available for any questions on homelessness.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. Okay. My question actually, I think, is for Ms. Harris. Since I think my colleagues pretty much covered my whole list of goodies here. Ms. Harris, we talked about the scoping and the size of the consultant contract and what the eventual plan is, which it looks like a very major planning undertaking. And the timeline for that, as I understand it from looking at the RFP, is due back at 12/23, which is the extent of our emergency declaration. And then we start considering it or making decisions thereafter into the year 2024. In terms of the interim plan and what is being discussed, what is happening, and what really prompts this question as much as anything is some of my colleagues desire, for example, to talk about a commercial vacancy ordinance, when in fact we have a situation that is not static. It seems to be evolving, and what I'm hearing from commercial property owners and some storefront owners is like, we don't know what to plan for. We don't know what you've got going on. So, what's evolving in the interim so we can put forth some information, or people can have some anticipation, because between now and we're going into our third summer. The planning process anticipates a fourth summer. And so there's a few blocks that are really wondering where we're going. So if you would, please.
Sure, Mayor Rouse, council members. So we have distinguished between the interim and the longer-term master plan. And that's why there was an ad hoc committee formed by some of the council members, working with public works staff on some of the more immediate needs for interim operations downtown. I believe that they will be coming at the end of June to your council to discuss different things that the ad hoc committee has been considering. In the kind of interim to long term, what I do envision is, we have the master plan looking towards end of 2023 to hopefully be complete. During that phase, once we have a consultant on board and have some outreach going, I do anticipate that we might be looking at opportunities to pilot various things to help really understand what could work downtown or what isn't working downtown, and test and try different ideas. And that over the next year, I see that as a real opportunity. I know that doesn't necessarily give business or property owners the assurance that something will be the same way, now and in 20 years. And that is just the reality of looking at a longer-term downtown master plan. So I recognize the challenge, and I think that's why we've tried to set up the interim group to really address some of the items like cleaning or maintenance that could be addressed in the shorter term.
Well, there's a fair amount of chicken and egg, but I'm thinking of things like, for example, the sign ordinance. And what would normally be a process that we've had in the past has been virtually suspended all over town. So the questions would be for people who have properties that are looking and shopping for tenants is, what are the standards going to be? And I realize that's hard to answer right now, but between now and when we anticipate being ready to make those answers is a long time to be without a tenant. And like I said, there's even the comments that have been made before today so far about things like vacancy ordinance are going, wait a minute, why are we being punished for this uncertainty? And where are we going to go with this? So I do think there's some immediacy, economic immediacy, that we need to address. And and I think I speak for a fair amount of folks out there. So yeah, I'd like to find out what the interim subcommittee is up to, what we can do in terms of giving some certainty out there in the community as much as is possible, and where we're going to go. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're on to comments. Mr. Jordan, you get to be first since you were so polite like before.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll tell you Mike Jordan's version of a commercial vacancy ordinance, just to respond to Mr. Colon's question. They exist in other cities, and they exist to not punish people, but to support the economic vitality of a region, to prohibit negative attractants that appear when buildings or businesses are vacant for a long period of time, and reduce the impacts that are on the adjacent businesses and the community at large. They're really maintenance standards more than anything else, and they're put in place to resolve the situation where the city becomes the de facto property manager because nobody else is doing it. Frequently on the front porches downtown that are vacant for a year or more, there's a homeless issue, and we end up either being, we or the downtown organization end up being either the enforcement or the property management function on that. And so they are a set of standards that would ensure or be the carrot for the parcel owner to keep his property up, keep the windows dressed, maybe rotate the lights on and off, and keep the maintenance up. And if they were absent or if they were vacant for a long period of time, and I'll just give you my poster child of choice, and that's the old Esau's restaurant in the 400 block that has been a plywood front for 10 years. 20 years, they would eventually have an assessment on that property owner to help spur them along to finding a tenant to put in that place. We can discuss or argue about when that would happen, how much it would be, how that would tier in over a period of time. But I suspect if we had something on the books that we would see people work a little bit harder to resolve the look of Esau's, if nothing else, and to maybe also get a tenant in there. And like I said,
Mr. Colon would like to weigh in on this point.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. I am very familiar with that framework of ordinance, and you needn't have a voter-approved tax. The structure would be a Proposition 26 regulatory fee. So typically, these ordinances require the owner to register the vacancy with the city within a period of time, maybe 6 months, maybe 3 months, and then pay the cost of maintenance if they don't do it themselves.
so that's just what I know on that. I've seen people nodding. We've all talked about it internally. I know we've talked about it with the city administrator. So if the pathway is to a two-person memo, I'll be the one looking for support from another to get that on a agenda to discuss for work.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Jordan, I don't think there's anything to preclude you from taking a vote at this meeting to direct that work.
Right, no, I agree.
So I don't need, you need a two-person memo. I
Oh.
think you could make the motion today.
Okay.
And just please give us sufficient clarity in what you are asking. I think if it's, as Mr. Kalan characterized it, we get it. If you have something other than what Mr. Kalan.
Okay, I'll circle back to that motion then. And then I just have some other general comments, just kind of frame of thought as they come up. First, really, really happy to see the designation of what you're calling the Community Vitality Division or Department under that. I think that this has so much potential, and I agree. I like the title. There's all kinds of mischief that can be within that title that is all good mischief, and I really like that. And then, again, a shout out to the new position that Liz Stotts is filling. I think great position. I don't think that issue is going to go away soon. So I am very appreciative of our commitment to that and commitment to her. And of course, that runs hand in hand with this week's appointment and start of Barbara Anderson as a second floor person to give that some help too. Liz in her bullet points did say represent on a bunch of things, and I know she means advocate. We're advocating for the city in all those roles with the county and the regional stuff and state funding, that kind of thing. And then just a couple things I've talked about in the past. I continue to be concerned with the lack of a clear path for someone who's having problems anywhere in community development to who they go to when they're having problems somewhere, okay? Right now it's me or somebody else sitting here. And it's just, it's uncomfortable, me getting involved with something like that. I'm assuming it's uncomfortable for other people. There's always two sides of the story. I don't like to hear our side of the story when it's right, just as I don't like to hear their side of the story when they're right. And I don't know the answer to that. The answer in the past has been, well, just look at the org chart and go up the org chart, but that just never seems to work for me. And so at some point, I'd like to see you structure that process. In the past, we've talked pie in the sky kind of thing, like having an ombudsman, and I don't think that's ever going to happen in terms of resources or being able to put a position there. But whether it's an ADU or a commercial project or a residential project, whatever it is, some clear method of who's your go-to person down there to go and get advice when they're having problems at a certain level of a certain type of any type of project, and that person can own that person's problem to go just get them in front of the next right person if they're having problems at a counter or with a planner or whatever it is. It'll save me a lot of grief, maybe save you a lot of grief. And then the other thing that's just on my radar list too is I just have recurring chatter about ADU difficulty. And at some point, and so my opinion is, I think ADUs are a great bang for the buck. They integrate into existing neighborhoods without any real impact, like 80 units going in on Milpas Street or whatever. It's not a big giant building going in where there was nothing. They just appear here and there. And they provide a segment of housing that it's unfortunate, I think, that we count as market rate, because I think maybe many times it isn't necessarily market rate, although maybe in today's society it is crazy market rate, but I'll be Pollyannish for a while and believe that until somebody shows me different. But I just think it's due for a check on that and a talk about it. And I don't know what that talk would look like, so I'm just going to put that burden on you guys. And as Eli knows, I mean, I've had two ADU issues in the last 6 months that just go down the rabbit hole, and I'm not really happy. And that just makes me wonder also about where we are also on solar and how easy it is to solarize, how easy it is to battery on a property. I've heard a couple people on the Mesa that have had trouble with the battery process when they've already been with battery process permits with the city when they've already been solarized on their entire roof. And you know, this city's stance on electricity should be facilitating and emphasizing the use of solar on residential or commercial properties, and the use of local storage right down to the property site. And I just kind of have the feeling if you don't ask, maybe you just don't hear what's really going on and what the challenges are and the problems are. And so I'd like to hear something about that at some point too. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. I agree with much of what Councilmember Jordan said, so I just have the following comments. First, I want to thank the entire staff for the presentation today and all the work that you're doing. It's a very wide-ranging department that that you have. Affects all aspects of our community, from homelessness to the building process to everything. So I just want to appreciate all the effort that you're putting in there. I'll just start off with the vacancy ordinance. The way that Councilmember Jordan articulated it is how I view it as well. It's just it's a way so that if there is an extended building, like he mentioned, that we have some controls, and that there are certain standards when a building is vacant, that we have a facade that looks nice, so it's not an empty window that's looking into an empty building that is an attractive nuisance. And there are standards for the private property on dealing with vagrancy issues that we can't deal with as a city. And so then, so I'm supportive of that moving forward and coming back to council to better articulate that. Short-term rentals, I am looking forward to, again, that coming back to us. I think that's a major issue for our housing supply, so I have a lot of questions when that comes up, but I'm glad we're looking at different options to reduce the staff time and be more effective in what we're doing. The LDT from the Oversight Committee, I want to especially appreciate all the staff that has been involved with that. I know Ms. Brooke, Ms. Dye, I can't name you all, so I just want to say I know you've been presenting, and it's been really great that process has gone on. It started with changing the vision of it, and it's helping our community, helping you enhance our city and build a better community. And I think that was the start. It took a lot of effort to get in there. I know there was a lot of wordsmithing that went into that, and the staff, all the staff had participated in it throughout the department to get to those specific words. And it really, that's where it starts, because there needed to be a shift in the culture of the department. And so for all the staff to come together and work on that, it led to a lot of reforms, and we see that at the Oversight Committee meetings. We saw it today with how the counter is run. That was an excellent presentation that was given at the last meeting. And just to see how that works and to be more efficient but more effective in how we're using staff time. So there was a lot of effort that went into it, even though it was just a little bit of the presentation today. And then the other examples is how we had the ordinance that just came before us. That was a major issue where people were going through remodels and found something that wasn't in compliance, but it wasn't them, it was the previous owners. So to be able to address that issue. And so we're making a lot of progress there, and we've hit a lot of the low-hanging fruit that we can do, and so a lot of the ordinances are coming forward. And in that, it's also the commissions is a part of it, and how we're looking at the efficiency of the commissions, like single-family design board, what triggers going there. So these are all part of the process, and it takes time, but I think the public, and I've noticed it, are seeing some changes just in how we're more efficient in operating. And then, again, I seriously love the community vitality. I think that is something innovative, and it's just going to be great to see how that we can use that. And then can support looking at our boards and commissions. So great job, and there's more work to be done, but thank you.
Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. So first, just I really support the reorganization and the sort of rebranding of what it is that community development does, and I think it's really reflective of our values and how we've kept stating them, and now I see it in the organization. So I really appreciate the sort of reclaiming of what it is that we're hoping to accomplish there. I'm just really want to recognize the added burden that you are under with the housing element update, and I think that's going to be such a huge focus, and just acknowledging that, and that didn't go as according to plan, with having consultant support, and if there are ways that we can support you in that, I think those are our wishes. Some comments too, in the economic development plan update that's coming this summer. I want to see some real detail, line by line descriptions of actions taken and actions planned. I'm interested particularly in what we're doing to develop business attraction and expansion, what we're doing for outreach, who we're trying to attract, how we're trying to do that. And in that, detailed, and I can't emphasize enough, I think we've seen some very broad stroke plans, and I think it's time to really dive deep and in detail into what those are. And if there isn't the proper staffing and support to see those come to fruition, I want to know that. I really think it's time to go in a deeper level there. So this summer, when that comes, that's what I'm going to be looking for. I'm really looking forward to the State Street Master Planning getting underway and the summer presentation there. I just want to bring it back to, it's really exciting. I mean, this came about from like a level of excitement of what could this be, and how could this be re-envisioned for the community, and for when you're talking next 50 years, I mean, these are like excitement level types of conversations, not like, oh, it needs to be clean and the basics, and just, yes, of course it needs to be clean, and we know public works wise and development wise, these have to be, up to code and be compliant and those things, but I mean the excitement of what it could be. So I'm looking forward to that in the summer, and I'm hoping that that's where this committee is going, is not in the being dragged down, but by the visioning, the really big, high level excitement level that I'm looking forward to that coming in the summer, our update, and I'm hoping that this committee of 15 people is not bogged down, but is energized by bringing ideas, not solving all the problems, but the whole goal with that was for those individuals to bring their perspective of ideas of what the goodness could be, and not with the problems. Yes, we need to address those, but my hope with those voices was that they would energize the process. So I'm hoping that that's the direction it's going. I wanted to say particularly thank you for the extra efforts with SB 9 and expediting that and taking that seriously and getting that underway, the ordinances for that.
and the Green Mobile Home Park also. Those were, extra work efforts I'm very appreciative of. I really can see and want to thank you for the continual improvements to process and customer service. We had a real problem, and it was systemic, and it was, it didn't matter who we talked to in the public, they all had a negative story, and it impacted everyone, and I'm really seeing huge progress and attention to that, and making that a priority, and I want to thank you for that. It's been a long time coming. The Excella, I'm just going to say, if we could just, maybe, I don't know. This thing has been, if it's worth it or not worth it. It takes so much staffing, money. We've been down this road so long. Is it working? I think just particularly with Excella, I think we need an assessment if that's, well, maybe I could just ask you right now. What is your assessment of Excella?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Sin. Acela is a tremendously powerful tool that requires a tremendous amount of customization and upkeep and maintenance and attention. And I think obviously the go live was prior to my tenure here at the city, but the typical amount of support that a system like that needs post go live, the city wasn't able to provide for a number of different reasons. And so some of the recommendations we're making in this year's budget, whether it be pursuing ARPA funds to dedicate towards that, or realigning a position to really focus on Acela optimization within the department, is really to address the sort of backlog of needs. And so I think if we were to do an assessment right now, I think we would say it's not performing the way we want it to. But I don't think that that's an indictment of the entire system. I think it's more a commentary on how we've supported it up to this point. And so I would respectfully ask to give us a little time. Let us put these resources towards the service, the software that we intend to over the next year. And let's look at it then and see if we see some glimmers of hope. I don't think we're ready to say it's time to move away. It's been a large investment up to this point, and I think there's a lot of potential there to be realized.
I appreciate that. That's actually a very helpful update. But keep us informed on that, and we get a lot of feedback about that program. And what I'm interested in is if moving forward with you in the lead, whether you think it's worth it continuing investing in, or what needs to happen on that. So thank you for that. And then I'm just going to make a personal note here. It was several years ago. I think it was, we were at what I considered to be sort of crisis levels, and I proposed 2 different ad hoc branches of council to be focused on State Street master planning, and another to be focused on land use oversight. The idea was that as council members, no one council member would be on both of those, but that we would divide that labor and attention. It continues to be very disappointing to me that I'm not on either of those. And I just want to put out there that I would still very much like to be part of the State Street Master Planning ad hoc committee. And we'll leave that there. But I am very gratified that both of those efforts are really bearing fruit. And this is, a couple years down, and I was told at the time that those would be, major work efforts, and they have been, and they've been very successful. I really am seeing the outcome of that. So thank you for highlighting that in these presentations.
All right, very good. Well, that does it for that presentation. Thank you. Ms. Bjork?
Mayor, I had indicated that your council could make a motion to direct us on work on the basis that we really are here to talk about next year's work and the funding for that, but your parliamentarian has advised me that we're better off to have that on properly agendized. So we will bring that on the June 8th meeting, which is your workshop for the budget, and you can give us direction at that point.
So you don't need a 2-person memo at this point, then?
No, I mean, and the reason we don't is that is the purposes of these hearings, is this is where we tell you about our plan of work for the next year, and you provide us input on our plan of work for the next year.
Very good, thank you. And thank you for your presentation. Mr. Colon.
Thank you for recognizing me. I want to make it clear, I wasn't trying to be obstreperous and asking you what you meant. I was trying to streamline it so we could get it done.
Okay, well, using words like obstreperous, we might have to start Googling those things. You on? Do you want a 5-minute break?
We have no plans to develop that.
Okay, 5 minutes then, please. We got, we're gonna see how. come back to order. And this is going to be about the Sustainability and Resilience Department.
Thank you,
Ms.
Mayor
Parent-
Rouse.
Oh, Ms. Parento, and Ms. Snedden wants to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. And very briefly, I do have to step away for this meeting, but I wanted to express support for the changes that are brought forward. We did hear these at our Sustainability Committee meeting, and really very strong support for this fledgling Department of Sustainability and Resilience, and very strong support for the continuation of this department, and enjoying seeing it grow.
Thank you. And we are mindful that a lot of us, a lot of folks in the room have obligations at noon, so good luck.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I am Lelia Parento, the Acting Director of Sustainability and Resilience. I'm joined with Lorraine Cruz Carpenter, the Acting Environmental Services Manager, Melissa Hedrick, the Acting Energy and Climate Manager, and Mr. Diego Martin, who is thankfully for us not acting as Finance Analyst. Next slide, please. So for our presentation today, we'll do a very quick department overview and org chart overview, and then express the highlights, the priorities, and the financial overview for our 3 programs. Next slide, please. Next slide. So in the Sustainability Department, we have a core mission to preserve a healthy, safe, and sustainable Santa Barbara by preserving natural resources, building local resilience, and protecting our most vulnerable communities. Next slide. We currently are comprised of 2 divisions, the Environmental Services Division that handles all things solid waste, the circular economy, and the Clean SB programs, and the Energy and Climate Division that handles energy management, energy projects and renewable energy, and climate action and adaptation. The combined operating budget for this department is $70 million in FY23. Next slide, please. Of course, sustainability is a core cultural concept in Santa Barbara, and we can't do it without the entire organization. This is clearly embedded in our operations throughout the organization, and we coordinate closely with the interdepartmental representatives throughout the city. Next slide, please. With that, I will hand it over to Ms. Cruz Carpenter.
Good afternoon. The main core of the environmental services work falls under 4 areas. Waste reduction and diversion. The goal of this work is to maximize solid waste diversion from the landfill by promoting reduction and recycling through outreach. We have our outreach team working with businesses, residents, and schools daily to teach them about proper recycling, waste reduction, and implementing programs. The other main function of our division is managing a solid waste utility. We do that by protecting public health, by providing reliable collection of residential and commercial waste. We also manage Clean SB, or a suite of cleanup programs that we call Clean SB, and we're focused on cleanup of litter, illegal dumping, and encampments. And last, we enforce city solid waste municipal code and state regulations related to solid waste. Next slide, please. SB 1383 is statewide legislation that requires jurisdictions to reduce the amount of organic waste disposed in landfills. Jurisdictions are required to provide recycling and organics collection, education and outreach, capacity planning, procurement of recovered organic waste products, and implementation of a food recovery network. This year, we began rolling out the required programs and have met all CalRecycle's deadlines to date. In June 2023, our current franchise hauler agreement is set to expire. In preparation, services for a waste characterization study and cost of service study were obtained to assist us in analyzing any future needs. And we obtained consultant services to provide expertise and guidance in developing a modern solid waste agreement. Chapter 7.16 of our Muni Code was also updated this year to provide for modern solid waste management practices, local enforcement authority of state laws, and compliance with SB 1383 requirements. Next slide, please. In order to engage with the community and address known hotspots for litter and illegal dumping, staff kicked off monthly neighborhood cleanups. During a 3-hour cleanup, residents can transform their neighborhood and learn how they can work with the city to keep the area clean. This fiscal year, Environmental Services also implemented a shopping cart retrieval program in alignment with the abandoned shopping cart ordinance. Our staff worked with stores on plans to keep carts contained on their property and a system to process those that make it onto the public right-of-way. Over the last year, we've continued to improve and build on our Clean SB centralized reporting system. The system enables us to track each report in detail and analyze the data to determine future needs. Next slide, please. Our largest priority this year will be developing a new modernized franchise agreement, including completion of the cost of service study, waste characterization study that we began this year. We'll also continue to work with a consultant to gain expert advice and recommendations for the new franchise agreement. In FY23, we'll also continue to work to meet the SB 1383 requirements, including continued education on recycling and organics recovery. And we'll work on implementing the organics recovery network with the county and neighboring jurisdictions. Next slide, please. In FY23, one of our main priorities will also be to comprehensively approach the work we do through our Clean SB program. The goal is to move from a complaint-driven model to a proactive one. Accordingly, our budget for FY23 proposes increased funding for encampment, litter, and illegal dumping cleanup. Funding would allow for fire-prone areas and hotspot encampments to be monitored on a systematic schedule. We'd use hourly staff and contracted labor to expedite cleanups, allowing us to address encampments before they get too large and require additional resources. We would also address litter and illegal dumping with the same systematic approach, monitoring hotspots citywide and dispatching contracted labor to resolve issues before they need to be reported. Increased volunteer events in neighborhoods and with schools would be implemented to build a partnership in this work. The funding would also be applied to increase cleanup along the waterfront during peak season, and a robust outreach and education campaign would be initiated to bring awareness to litter and illegal dumping issues and to focus on long-term behavioral change. And I'd also like to add on May 16th that the Sustainability Committee unanimously voted to support this increased funding for the Clean SB program. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Rouse, council members. My name is Diego Martin, finance analyst, and I'll be walking you through some of the numbers today. Sure. So on this first slide, we see changes in our revenues for fiscal year 23. A couple important things to note here. First is the solid waste fees for hauling, processing, disposal. This is the revenue that is passed along to Marburg and the county for those hauling, processing, disposal services. These costs are closely related to our proposed rate increase. The second thing to note is a big change for the Clean SB related programs. This revenue is related to our litter pickup, our encampment cleanup, and other community programs. And it's one of our bigger proposals for this coming year. The third thing to note here is the change in the solid waste management set of revenues. I think there's a lot of one-time costs in FY22 that will no longer be the case in FY23, particularly our consultant studies was kind of a one-time source of money and expenditure for the program, as well as our reserves recovery. So in our rates, we build in kind of reserves recovery to kind of get back to what the policy level is, and we are projected to hit that level in FY22, and so we take those out of our rates for 23, which helps to mitigate the rate increase somewhat. This next slide shows the proposed expenditures for fiscal year 23. A couple things to note here. I think the salary and benefits line, in particular in 22, shows what we actually think we will be spending for staff compensation in fiscal 22. It does include some departmental savings related to vacancies that we had throughout the year. And FY '23 is the total appropriation ask, so it's kind of assumes that we are fully staffed throughout the whole year. And really kind of is the maximum that we would be able to spend. We traditionally do see some savings there as we go through. The next item you'll probably know is our Clean SB program, which Ms. Cruz Carpenter talked about. We are asking for additional resources to address increased and more proactive litter removal, encampment cleanup activities, and abandoned waste cleanup. We are looking to expand those services from about $245,000 up to $950,000 for next year. Let's see. And so you will receive a more in-depth presentation at our June 14th hearing for our solid waste rates. So I'm just going to briefly go over some of the slides. We are proposing a 3% increase overall for next year for our solid waste rates. And really kind of different components related to kind of collection, which is the Marburg piece of the fee. Processing disposal is what we pass on to the county for the Resource Recovery Center. And then everything else that we've talked about, programming, contracts, reserve requirement, acts, to mitigate the fee increase somewhat for this next year. In addition to our rates, we also have some new fees that we're proposing for next year, which we covered in the Finance Committee in the last couple of meetings. 3 new rates for the next year that we're proposing. First, we are proposing a flat rental rate for some enclosure space for city-owned enclosures. Second, and as part of recent code amendments that updated solid waste management practices, staff is proposing a $90 fee for shopping cart impoundments. There were some questions during Finance Committee about what the specifics of the fee was or what it was for. Just to confirm, these fees are designed to recover staff costs to impound and arrange for the retrieval of the shopping carts. Any other kind of business costs to comply with some of the new code amendments are not really included, and it's kind of separate and apart from this particular fee. And third, to take advantage of some of the city's buying power, staff is proposing to pass along the savings of recycling and composting bins to businesses by selling those items at cost. And all other fees, we're proposing to increase by 3% next year in line with our solid waste rate increase. This next slide shows where we are as a city in comparison to some neighboring jurisdictions. We all pay tipping fees to the county at roughly the same rate. So that really the differences here are related to our Marburg contract and some other kind of community programming that we offer. And some of the specifics of the specific type of services that we offer will result in some differences in cost to families and businesses. And again, the hearing on June 14th will go into a much deeper dive into the rates, how they were built, and how they will affect 2023. So here's a slide showing our projected reserves balance for the solid waste fund. As you can see, because of our reserves recovery revenue, in addition to some unexpected one-time revenues and some careful monitoring of the department's expenses, we expect to meet our policy target for the first time in several years at the conclusion of this year. For FY23 and beyond, we will include some amount of reserves recovery as a small portion of each year's fee increase. I'll pass along now to Ms. Hetrick.
Thank you. Next slide. So the Energy and Climate Division works on a number of interdepartmental initiatives and projects related to energy conservation, renewable energy, greenhouse gas reduction, climate adaptation, and other resilience measures such as energy assurance. We also manage energy services for all departments of the city, including managing bills, energy agreements, and looking for opportunities for conservation and other cost savings. Next slide. In fiscal year 22, we accomplished a lot. We implemented our natural gas prohibition on new buildings
including doing industry outreach, preparing bilingual informational materials, and staff trainings. We worked with the building department to expand our on-demand permitting for not just solar projects, but also battery installations at residences. We launched technical analysis and environmental analysis on our climate action plan. We've been working with Fleet to develop a zero-emission vehicle acquisition policy that would prioritize the acquisition of zero-emission vehicles for the city when economical to do so. We got 3 grants for sea level rise implementation projects along the waterfront, airport, and to create a regional shoreline monitoring program. And then we've been participating and leading regional collaboration on issues related to GHG emissions, adaptation, and resilience. Next slide. We've completed a number of projects. We just completed the Pershing Parks lighting retrofit project that saved about $1,500 a year annually on that utility bill. We're in the middle of and almost complete with the Fire Station 1 project, which is a replacement of an old solar array system and installation of a battery to act as a backup for emergency operations and city servers. We just passed design review for our Granada Garage solar and storage microgrid project and anticipate starting construction on that at the end of summer. We've been working with a team at UCSB's Bren School to do a feasibility study looking at potentially putting floating solar at Laurel Reservoir. We've also been working with the county to do energy and resilience assessments at the Westside Center, Franklin Center, and Eastside Library to look at whether one of those locations would be a good spot for a resilience hub for our community. And then we're about to go to council on a contract with Carbon Solutions Group to deploy over 100 electric vehicle charging stations throughout the city. Next slide. So next fiscal year, we have several goals. We plan on completing a zero-emission vehicle action plan, which will provide the map for both our city and our community transitioning to low-emission or zero-emission vehicles. We plan on completing our climate action plan and EIR, launching our sea level rise projects, completing the Granada Garage solar and storage microgrid, and then initiating waterfront and airport solar projects. We'll be installing the electric vehicle charging stations that I mentioned previously, and continuing to support the sustainable design for the police station and airport terminal expansion project. And then we're always looking for opportunities to streamlining permitting and processes for our storage, solar, and vehicle charging projects. And with that, I'll hand it back to Mr. Martin to go through the numbers.
Thank you, Ms. Hedrick. So here are the slides for revenue for the energy and climate programs. First, there are 3 main sources of revenue. First, the energy and climate allocation, and this is the energy and climate allocated revenues that we charge to other city funds based on overall energy usage, which goes to cover salary and program expenses. Second is the utility management allocated revenues, which are charged to general fund and related programs specifically to pay for energy and natural gas costs. And third is the kind of other category, which mainly consists of grant revenue. One thing to note here is you may recall the department recently was awarded 3 grants from the Coastal Commission for about $2.1 million. Those revenues and expenditures are not included in these slides yet, but they do change the conversation a little bit about our strategy moving forward, and we'll address that in a few minutes. So this slide shows the proposed expenditures for the department. As mentioned in the solid waste section, FY22 column represents what we actually think we'll be spending, which includes some significant salary and benefit savings due to several vacancies in the department. And the FY23 column represents the total appropriation request, really the maximum that we intend to spend if we were fully staffed. It's important to note that we're not proposing any additional positions in this fund at this time. Another thing to note here is that so this slide differs a little bit from the budget book link on the website. Mostly related to capital. So while we have $456,000 appropriated for capital projects, we actually only expect to spend about 120,000 in FY '22, with the remainder either being carried over for projects into FY '23 or dropping down to fund reserves for future appropriation. And it's important to note here that we're still doing quite a bit of work, and a lot of that is going to be carried by some of the grant funding that we expect to receive next year. So here's a slide on our reserves. So this is our reserve picture. I think because the operating and capital funds were originally thought to be one single program with the savings in one, supplementing the spending in the other, we thought it made sense to present the kind of combined reserves of these two funds here. As you can see, the fund is fairly new, but as an internal service fund, the target is about 10% of operating costs. And you can see that we're running a pretty lean budget, trying to get any excess reserves back into projects as quickly as we can. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Parento for SBCE.
Thank you. Next slide, please. All right, you're all fairly familiar with what Santa Barbara Clean Energy does, but it's really our opportunity to buy and build carbon-free electricity and supply it to our community. It enables us to develop local programs that really help make our community make climate-smart decisions and work with City Council to align those energy sources with your goals. Ultimately, the goal is to build local energy resilience by building the generation assets here, and then we can leverage that carbon-free electricity to provide viable pathways to carbon neutrality. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder of how Community Choice Energy works. We buy and procure the electricity on behalf of the community. Southern California Edison continues to deliver it, and then we get to reinvest all excess revenues into our community as opposed to distributing those back to the SCE territory or to their shareholders. The benefit there is really the investment, again, in alignment with our goals and into local resilience. Next slide, please. A couple of program highlights. First and foremost is program participation. The feasibility study modeled an 80% program participation. We're enjoying over 95%, which is a tremendous success. You'll see in our commercial sector, we're actually over 98%, and that's a huge win for us. Next slide, please. It's important to know that this is the single most impactful action the city has ever taken to fight climate change. With the launch of Santa Barbara Clean Energy, we essentially eliminated 20% of Santa Barbara-related greenhouse gas emissions, that yellow piece of the pie related to electricity, especially because we're enjoying the 95% participation rate. But what's doubly exciting about that is that it actually gives us a viable pathway to meet your ambitious carbon neutrality goal by leveraging that carbon-free electricity to decarbonize the natural gas sector and the transportation sector through building electrification and vehicle electrification, and that's really exciting. Next slide, please. When we launched and proposed Community Choice Energy, we made it clear that it would take us a few years to build the capital we would need to provide incentives and rebates to our community. However, our team got together at the inception of SBCE and tried to figure out ways that we could provide value add to our customers. We were really successful in leveraging community partnerships and local business owners to provide rebates and discounts on services that come from here in Santa Barbara. So we offer discounted electric bicycle memberships, electric vehicle purchases, solar and storage purchases, and then some appliance rebates. These programs have been tremendously successful given the limited staff capacity we have to promote them, and we're really excited about continuing these moving forward. It's important to note these required zero upfront capital from the city. Next slide, please. For fiscal year 23, we continue to look forward to building a strong reserve and rate stabilization fund. We want to continue to develop customer programs that really benefit our community and move towards our carbon neutrality goals and enroll a significant amount of participants in those programs. We want to continue to engage the community in Santa Barbara Clean Energy. A lot of folks are very confused about what this is. It's a complicated issue, and people aren't used to thinking about their electricity bills in two parts. So it's really continuing that story and really sharing with them how just participating in the program is a significant environmental action. And then lastly, a major priority of your council and of staff is to build local energy resilience here. We're at a particularly vulnerable point on the transmission lines, and we'd like to increase our security and energy assurance by building generation assets here. Next slide, please. Next slide. Before Mr. Martin goes into the numbers, I have a couple of things I want to walk you through. So first and foremost, Santa Barbara Clean Energy is a startup, and as we knew going in, the first couple of years would be a bit rocky. The pro forma modeled a difficult first 2 years, and we're experiencing those difficulties. So firstly, we are operating with zero baseline data. So when the customers transition from Southern California Edison, we do not get accurate load data, we do not get accurate billing data, and we have no idea how our customers behave. So it's a bit of a black box for year one until we get that baseline data. Next, we have a number of factors that are impacting Santa Barbara Clean Energy cash flows that require some council consideration. So first, our launch timing. We launched our residential phase in October, and in September of 2021, when we started contracting, there was a significant market run-up due to several major factors that I'll go into in a moment. Additionally, phase 2 only just launched, so we're still sort of, the dust is settling on that launch, and we're figuring out how people pay their bills and when. The higher than modeled participation is a fantastic benefit to the program. However, in year one, it leaves us exposed to last minute energy purchases because we only contracted up to the 80%. So just for this particular year, it leaves us a little bit vulnerable, but in future years, we have a very conservative procurement and hedging strategy that does not leave us open to those vulnerabilities. And then lastly, we had a few months of difficult arrearage collection. So arrearage is money that is owed to you but has not been paid yet. And oddly, for the first 3 months of the program, we were experiencing a 6 to 8% arrearage rate. Now, if you compare that to water's post-COVID arrearage rate, which is 1%, that was surprising and unanticipated. I'm happy to note that we did receive a new arrearage report this morning, and we're down to 3%, so we're going in the right direction. However, what this all means is that our cash flows are out of balance. We're currently not receiving the cash flows we need that we're putting out, though the models show that we're going to get there relatively quickly. And so I have more on that in a moment. Next slide, please. I just wanted to run through why the markets are so crazy right now. So first of all, the geopolitical situation globally is not helping us. Though the war in Ukraine does not directly impact our energy sources, it impacts those of our neighbors, which then puts pressure on ours. Second, we have historically low gas shortage in California, mostly due to some major pipeline explosions that have really limited our natural gas supply. Natural gas remains the biggest electricity source in California, and so that has put upward pressure on the pricing. And then last but not least, extreme drought has put upward pressure on the next most available power supply, which is hydroelectricity. So just for a demonstration, if you look at this graph, we started purchasing power on the yellow line, September of 2021, and today we're at the white line. So a significant increase of $20 to $40 per megawatt hour, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is when you're purchasing a significant amount of energy like we are. Next slide, please. The next thing to consider is the startup loan. So the general fund did provide a $2 million startup loan that was to be paid back over 5 years. The pro forma is actually remaining accurate and actually is looking a little bit better than anticipated, but as I mentioned, our cash position is out of balance. So it is possible that moving into the next fiscal year, we would be at a negative cash position, which is not acceptable for our budget standpoint. So what we would want to do is possibly increase the loan amount just to move into the next fiscal year, and that would be paid back. The additional benefit of that is it helps us to show that we have cash on hand to market suppliers, which provides more favorable terms. Next slide, please. Additionally, the loan repayment was slated to start in fiscal year 23. However, the pro forma shows us using the loan in fiscal year 23 and 24, so it doesn't quite make sense to us to repay it in fiscal year 23. We would recommend pushing out the loan repayment 1 year and revisiting in fiscal year 24 in hopes that the pro forma actually outperforms itself and we're able to start repayment earlier. Next slide, please. So overall, the cash flow support that we're recommending is to delay that loan repayment 1 year, to increase the available loan amount. We don't currently have a recommendation on that increased amount because we'd like to wait and see where we are at the end of the year and propose something at council's year-end adjustments that makes sense. It is important to note that that increased loan amount would only be drawn upon if needed. So otherwise, it would stay in the general fund balance. Additionally, we would like to recommend that you increase the 100% green service offering premium from 1.2 cents to 1.6 cents. The original pro forma actually recommended a 1.6 cent premium increase, but we headed into some very favorable market conditions, which allowed us to reduce that and mitigate cost increase to our customers. Those market conditions no longer exist, and so we would like to recommend that we make that change. Next slide, please. This is just to show you the premium change impact. The green line on the bottom is the status quo 1.2 cent premium impact on the pro forma. And then the middle line in red is the 1.6 cents. This is somewhat telling, but the next slide is actually more telling. Next slide, please. So this shows you the difference. If we stay at 1.2 cents, we remain in the negative until late fiscal year 25. But with the 1.6 cent premium, we actually go cash flow positive by the end of the next fiscal year. Next slide, please. This chart shows you the average impact on the average customer by rate class. So for the residential customer that's currently enrolled in 100% green, the impact is about $2 a month if they're paying $186 currently. So it's rather small. Same with small commercial. It's about a $3 impact per month. It does get a little bit larger for large commercial and industrial, but it's important to note that most of the industrial customers are municipal. And so we will work closely with those customers that are our organizational customers to provide energy efficiency opportunities. Next slide, please. So again, the 1.6 cent premium allows us to take a balanced approach to really prioritizing those reserve growth and rate stabilization, accelerate program and incentive funding, and to ultimately provide rate relief, because we will revisit this premium annually as part of the budget process. And then possibly most importantly, to build that local energy resilience that we've been wanting to do. Next slide, please. And one thing I wanted to say about energy resilience is that we spent a lot of time during the feasibility phase talking to other community choice energy providers about how they would approach our energy reliability and resilience problem here in Santa Barbara. And pretty much the blanket response was, we won't. We won't be able to invest. It's too expensive to do so in Santa Barbara. That has actually manifested in Edison's multiple solicitations to build local energy generation, which they've abandoned due to cost. And so I think that really emphasizes that Santa Barbara Clean Energy truly is the only organization prepared to do that for our community. In fact, it's already in process. We're developing multiple microgrids, as Ms. Hedrick mentioned, at critical facilities. And then we're developing programs that enable the customer to do that at their own facility. And we think that that's the most expeditious way to get that energy resilience. We're also building resilience hubs, again, to protect those most vulnerable communities. Next slide, please. And now back to Mr. Martin.
Mayor Rouse, council members, I should note before I get onto the numbers in our slides that these numbers that we're presenting here today do vary or do diverge significantly from the numbers that are in the budget book online. For all the reasons that Ms. Parenteau talked about, namely significant volatility in the global energy markets that affect our bottom line. The numbers were also crafted kind of pre our commercial launch, so the participation rate changes what we expect to spend and bring in next year. And of course, the recommendation from the CCE subcommittee was to move to a 1.6 cent premium, and the numbers were kind of based on 1.5 cent premium, sorry, tongue twister. So a fuller accounting of the specific changes to specific line items will be included in the package of amendments to staff's recommended budget, which will be before you for consideration at the hearing on June 8th. So that being said, here's the current financial picture for the following year. And so it's important to realize, of course, that in FY22 was our launch year in the fall and the spring for residential and commercial phases. FY23 represents the first full year of the fund's operation. This next slide shows our reserve estimate for the next year. Albeit it's a little scary, particularly for a finance person like me, looking at a slide like this, but I think, as Ms. Parenteau outlined, we are a startup. This is our first year, and we're just building our reserves, beginning to build our reserves. I think the important thing to note, looking at this slide, is that we are projecting a positive contribution to reserves in FY23. If we were a private sector entity, I would say we're turning a profit for the first time next year, which I think is a great start for us. This next slide shows a little bit longer-term reserve outlook. While we don't yet have an official council-adopted reserve policy like other enterprise funds, in the red line, we're showing a target of 25% of adopted operating expenditures. As you can see, the first few years, we focused on service delivery, a modest amount on new programming, and on building reserves. And we think that by FY26, within the first 5 years of the program launch, we will have built our reserves to the level that we expect and really begin to allow flexibility for council in achieving savings to other parts of the budget or to really build more expansive programming and capital projects.
All right, and then just our last section, a modest amount, very modest amount of dollars for the Sustainability and Resilience Department do come from the general fund. So just like everyone else, we had a target reduction to meet there. Our target reduction was $1,300, so very small. However, we took an opportunity to really dig in and see how else we could create efficiencies and shift some of that burden over. So we are proposing to move the staffing that is currently funded out of the general fund over into the Sustainability and Resilience Department, as well as some of the small programming costs that were in that fund. The ultimate savings to the general fund is $230,000, so we think this is a benefit. The Energy and Climate Fund we're pointing out here just because it was so close to not meeting its reserve target there. We wanted to show you how it's going to stay balanced. We are going to continue to hold the Energy and Climate Specialist position open that's been vacant for the past 1.5 years for an additional 6 months. And then we're going to leverage those recently acquired Sea Level Rise grants, which have some staffing cost components to them, to help us offset some of the administrative costs since they will be spending so much time on the work. Next slide, please. So really the proposed staffing changes, and these are new from the budget that was submitted to you previously, is to move one code enforcement officer that is currently 3/4 time to full-time. As you heard Ms. Cruz Carpenter say, we have lots of work to do in that area, and we would love that added staffing. And then reallocating the financial analyst position that is paid for currently partly out of the general fund via IT and HR, completely to Sustainability and Resilience. We will continue to support IT and HR in the spirit of interdepartmental collaboration. And then moving the costs of the Sustainability and Resilience Director out of the general fund and completely into, and moving those costs into solid waste and energy and climate. Lastly, the climate analyst position, which is filled by Ms. Hedrick, is currently funded half out of the general fund, and we're proposing to move that fully into the energy and climate division. And with that, we're available for questions.
Questions, Mr. Friedman?
Sorry, I need to go to another meeting. They're having quorum issues there, so can I make a quick statement? Just want to thank you all for the work you've done. I've been through many of the presentations. This is super exciting, this department, the CCE and everything. This goes back many years, so it's great to see in fruition. And with that, I just want to say I support the proposed staffing changes as well as the delay the repayment to the general fund to when it's no longer needed as working capital. So thank you.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I popped off at community development on solar, so maybe I should only half of that. But can you tell me your role on the permitting with solar and just kind of my feeling that, as I see you have some numbers there of success, but what I get the feeling that anybody who wants to do solar, it's a slog through the city process, and then once they've got solar and they want to put a couple batteries in their garage, it's another slog. And my feeling is generally we should be like almost paying those people to do that. But so what's your input on where we are in solar and batteries?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Jordan, Mayor Rouse. We've worked very closely with the Building and Safety Division to create streamlined permitting through the on-demand permitting process and have been very successful. We currently have streamlined on-demand permits for small solar, so residential-sized solar, solar plus battery, and standalone batteries? We're working on standalone batteries. That effort has been tremendously successful. We've had over 200 permits issued through that effort. We've gotten a lot of contractor feedback that this has made the whole process so much easier. So that is sort of step one. Step 2, there's a number of legislative actions that have come out that really remove the ability to have discretionary review purview. And I'm going to let Ms. Hedrick talk to that because she's been spearheading that.
So before you go there, hold that thought. Sometimes the devil's in the details. Small solar, tell me what that means, because maybe what I'm hearing is like when people want to do some level of solar that is more than some arbitrarily capped amount for a resident. So tell me what that means.
Absolutely. So the current small solar limitation is about 20 kWh, which is actually quite large for a residential unit. For example, I have solar on my home and I have 6 kWh, so it's large. And for the battery, I believe it's 13 kW. Again, a pretty good size for a residential array. There are different permitting requirements for residential buildings versus commercial, and that's why it's limited to the residential side. Additionally, the size is actually regulated by Southern California Edison due to interconnection requirements. You're currently not allowed to build solar beyond 85% of your load, and that's because they don't want you exporting to the grid. So they allow you to overbuild if you have a planned investment in an electric vehicle or electric appliances, but you have to sort of show what that plan is. So that's really the limiting factor for sizing. People can't
So
overbuild.
you can't go past that 85% if you're also going to store?
Correct. Yes,
Really?
correct. You are not allowed to go over the 85%
So it's
for
not,
storage.
it's really a legislative challenge rather than somebody to go fight with Edison rather than something we're doing.
The very controversial NEM 3.0 proceeding that we spoke to you all about, which was to revisit how solar customers were compensated for the power that they generated, did account for that. It was going to allow home generators to build up to 150% of their load, which would be great news for resilience. Actually, not great news for Santa Barbara Clean Energy as a business model. That's a little bit challenging because we pay a lot for that over generation. But so these are balances that we have to make, right? But it did contemplate that, and we haven't seen what the revised decision or proposed decision is yet, but I would imagine it might allow for some overproduction.
Okay. Ms. Hedrick.
Just briefly, Councilmember Jordan, there have been a number of legislative changes that have expanded. There's always been a streamlining for actual solar systems. You're not allowed to do design review or require discretionary for solar. But there was a lot of questions that came up like, well, what if you put solar on a canopy? And is the canopy exempt and things like that? And so the legislature really just opened it wide up, like anything to do with installing solar and getting it going in your house and business does not require a discretionary review. And so we're working with community development to develop internal processes so that those permits are really just going straight to the on-demand building permit system.
Okay, thanks.
All right, very good. Quick question on community cleanups. Do we have a published schedule for that?
We have another cleanup coming up this Saturday.
Would you schedule, when you schedule cleanups, would you forward those to council, please, the dates and times and
We
places?
sure could, Councilmember.
Appreciate that. And
Mayor
then,
Rouse, I'm sorry.
as far as, I would like actually to meet offline with you about the solid waste, the Tahigas situation, where we're at with that, recycling, and of course, food scraps. So there's a whole bunch of good stuff to cover that we need to chat about, but not here, not today.
Thank you, Barros. Let me just mention too that we do plan on coming back to council on July 19th with the discussion of the solid waste
Right.
contract, and we can address some of those things
Yeah,
then too.
I just have some little niggling details I'd like to talk to you about beforehand if we can. Any other questions or comments from council? Comments? Again?
I haven't made one yet. So I'll just admittedly admit that I'm probably pretty ignorant on everything you do. So I've just been hyper-focused on the community choice thing. And I'm, your starting slides kind of show you're like everywhere, right? Bicycles to whatever. And I am hesitant to just blanketly say, delay your loan and go take another however much you want out of the reserves without having a discussion more on what your core function is that you're trying to protect, or your core function should be, and what your secondary function should be. And if there's some things you just have to delay. I mean, like, if you had to prioritize where those dollars are going, what are the first priorities to the last priorities? Personally, I just think you make sense in what you say, but I get to answer to the 1.6 when that news gets out, and we've already had to answer with the rollout at the same time Edison increased their prices and what that was, and I don't want to live through that again if there's just a reason to say, okay, we get it, we're screwed because of the world and whatever, and our timing and all those reasons you listed. But does that mean we just continue to move money around and hope we're not in the same situation when the money comes due? You'll be back to talk about that, I guess, but if you want to set me up a time to do that individually, I'm happy to hear that. But right now, it just it doesn't appeal to me the way you've laid it out, just to delay potentially the repayment to the general fund, which is back to the reserves, and to take more money from the general fund, which is out of the reserves, without knowing specifically what that does and what the priorities are. So, thank you.
All right, very good. If there's no other comments, we are adjourned. Good job getting right there at the finish line.